Hey, what is up, mortals? It is JSatwekar here, and welcome to part 1 of What If Aizawa Was in 1A. Just wanted to greet you guys by saying sit back and relax. You're in for a treat. And so we begin. It was just another day at the middle school that Aizawa attended. As he walked to class, Aizawa noticed something out of the corner of his eye. It was Katsuki Bakugo. He and his minions were picking on another student. Aizawa recognized the student as Izuku Midoriya. The thing that bothered Aizawa the most about the scene was that Bakugo was using his quirk to intimidate the green-haired boy. Bakugo must have known that this was against the school's rules. Aizawa heard Bakugo say to Midoriya, "You think you can be a hero, Deku? You're a hopeless loser." Bakugo raised his hand to unleash an explosion at the trembling Midoriya. Aizawa walked up to the scene and activated his quirk, his eyes going from their usual dark brown to a piercing red. "You know it's against the rules to use your quirk to harm another person, Bakugo," Aizawa said. "Aizawa," Bakugo sneered. "What business is this of yours?" "It concerns me because you're picking on my schoolmate. This behavior is irrational," Aizawa said. "I'm just trying to make this little twerp understand that the only thing that matters when it comes to being a hero is power and strength." Bakugo said this with fire in his eyes and magma in his voice. "From what I can see, Bakugo, you're acting more like a villain than a hero. What would your beloved All Might say if he saw this scene?" Aizawa stood firm after saying this to the atomic blonde. While this scene was playing out, Aizawa was thinking to himself that he needed to end this quickly because his quirk was about to time out. Bakugo got right in Aizawa's face and sneered. The two boys held each other's gaze for what seemed to Aizawa to be forever, but was only a minute or two. Bakugo then turned and left the scene without a word. Aizawa then blinked and collapsed to his knees. When Aizawa opened his eyes again, the once trembling figure of Izuku Midoriya was standing over him. Midoriya had a look of concern on his face when he said, "Are you all right? Are you hurt?" These statements surprised Aizawa. "Am I all right? I should be asking you that. After all, you were the one that was just being bullied." Midoriya cracked a worried smile. "I guess you have a point, but I'm okay. How about you?" Aizawa did not understand how this guy could go from cowering from fear of physical harm one minute, then to showing concern over someone else's well-being the next. It seemed completely irrational to Aizawa's mind. As Aizawa said this, he reached into his pocket and retrieved a bottle of eye drops. He then placed 2 drops in his eyes. "You did not ask my name," Aizawa said as he blinked the drops into his eyes. "I beg your pardon?" "It's only logical for a person to ask the name of a person who defended them." "Oh, I already know who you are," Midoriya said enthusiastically. "You're Shoto Aizawa, and your quirk is Quick Erasure. It allows you to temporarily block someone from using their quirk." Midoriya then began to ramble on about how cool Aizawa's quirk was. "Whoa," Aizawa said, deadpan. "How do you keep all that information in your head without it leaking out of your ears?" "Oh, sorry, I tend to ramble, especially when I see a cool quirk." Midoriya said this while rubbing the back of his head with a look of shame on his face. "I also know who you are," Aizawa said. "You're Izuku Midoriya, the kid without a quirk, but who still wants to be a hero." As Aizawa said the words, he could not get past how irrational the idea was. Aizawa wished to be a hero, just like Midoriya and many of his classmates. But at least they had quirks that were fit for the job. Or, failing that, could be developed to the point where they would be useful. He could not understand why someone who was quirkless would think that they could become a hero. Aizawa's curiosity finally overcame him, and he asked Midoriya, "Are you serious about becoming a hero, even though you're quirkless?" Midoriya stood dumbstruck by Aizawa's bluntness. The green-haired boy stood there for a few minutes, unable to say anything. When he finally spoke, his voice was full of uncertainty. "I know that it may seem crazy to most people for a quirkless loser like me to become a hero. It'd probably be easier if I were to become a doctor or a lawyer. It would certainly be a lot safer. But everything in my heart and soul tells me that I must be a hero that saves everyone with a smile on his face." The passionate words from Midoriya made Aizawa feel as if this plain-looking boy might just be able to do it. Even with this feeling, the ever-rational Aizawa knew that Midoriya was unlikely to get into any hero course. He was so small in stature and lacked any muscle. Aizawa reached into his pocket and took out a piece of paper. He quickly wrote an address on it and handed it to Midoriya. Aizawa looked directly at Midoriya and said, "Meet me at that address after school." Aizawa turned and calmly walked to class. Later that day, Aizawa and Midoriya stood outside of a modest house in a city suburb. The house was painted gray with a gray tile roof. Midoriya wondered just what kind of place this was that he had come to. "Aizawa, is this your home?" Aizawa remarked. "This is my home." This surprised Midoriya. Aizawa unlocked the front door. The two boys then walked into the living room. The whole interior of the house was just as plain as the outside. The living room was furnished with gray chairs and sofas. There were no decorations that Midoriya could see, just walls painted a dull gray. Midoriya remarked, "Well, this is an interesting place." Aizawa stated, "My parents are not big on interior decorating." "Oh, are your parents here?" Midoriya wondered what the parents of Aizawa must look like. "My parents work late every night. They will not disturb us. Follow me." Aizawa then turned and walked to a door by the stairs. Midoriya thought it must lead to the basement. He followed Aizawa as he descended the stairs. To call the space the boys entered a basement would have been the understatement of a lifetime. The place was as big as a gymnasium. Against one wall was every kind of weight machine you could think of. The rest of the space was taken up by a parkour course. There was also a climbing wall near the back of the room. In one corner, Midoriya made out a desk and bed that was almost obscured by all the equipment. "What is this place? It's huge!" Midoriya could not believe that something this size was under such an unassuming home. "This is my training room," Aizawa said. "What do you need to train for? Your quirk lets you take away other people's powers." Aizawa replied with a voice full of irritation. "My quirk stops working when I blink, plus it has no effect on hexamorphic quirks." Midoriya was surprised by these admissions. "But still, wouldn't that mean that most villains would be helpless against you?" Aizawa responded. "My power would do nothing to stop a villain from beating me down at their normal strength and escaping. Since my quirk does not come with any physical boosts, I have to build my body the old-fashioned way." Aizawa then ran over to the climbing wall and scaled it before Midoriya knew what was going on. From the top of the climbing wall, Aizawa looked down at Midoriya. "To be honest, I think that your dream of becoming a hero is irrational. In most cases, having no quirk would make you a liability. It would put yourself and others in more danger." Midoriya was shocked to hear it put so bluntly, but this was not the first time he had heard those words. Even still, those words still felt like a rusty dagger being plunged into his chest. All Midoriya could do was stand there. "I have no power to stop you from following your dream, but it would be irrational of me not to help you prepare for the hard road ahead of you." Aizawa paused a moment to let his words sink in. "What are you saying, Aizawa?" "While I may not be a world-class hero trainer, I can still help you get stronger. Build your body to offset your lack of a quirk." Midoriya had no words. He barely knew Aizawa, yet he was willing to train him. As tears started to stream down his face, Midoriya could only get out 2 words. "Thank you." Aizawa was unfazed by the show of emotion. He then said, "Oh, you should not thank me. I plan to put you through the most grueling training of your life. It will feel like you're dying." Midoriya was creeped out by the sinister look that crept across Aizawa's face. Aizawa interrupted Midoriya's freak out when he said, "What hero course do you plan to apply to, Midoriya?" Midoriya's eyes lit up when he said that he wanted to attend UA, just like his hero All Might. Aizawa then revealed that he wanted to attend UA as well. His belief was that if you are going to become a hero, then you should become the best one you can. That meant attending UA. Aizawa then said, "That means we have 2.5 years to get in the best shape we can." Midoriya responded that he would do whatever it takes to be a hero. Aizawa then said, "Okay, let's get started." Every afternoon, the two boys would train at Aizawa's house. Midoriya would then go home to study, eat dinner, and sleep. They would even train extra hard on the weekends. It was hard for Midoriya to keep up with the fast pace that Aizawa set at first. But as the days passed, it became a little easier for him, and his body got stronger. Aizawa was most impressed by the fact that Midoriya never gave in. He had expected the brutal training to break the boy's spirit. Despite everything, Midoriya just kept at it. This is how 2.5 years passed for the two boys. While Aizawa would never be described as the emotional type like Midoriya, he did grow to care about Midoriya over that time. The two boys formed a brotherly bond, with Aizawa playing the role of the sullen older brother to Midoriya's emotional younger brother. This relationship would affect both boys going forward. Aizawa would see Midoriya as a friend that he could rely on. Midoriya would grow more confident in his physical abilities because of Aizawa's training and friendship. We next meet up with the two boys in class. A teacher stands in front of the class. The teacher announces to the class, "Well, students, I could hand out these career tests, but what's the point?" He then throws the tests into the air. "I know that you all want to go on the hero track." The students go crazy. They all start to openly display their quirks. The teacher then tells the students that they are impressive, but it is against school rules to use their quirks during class. The voice of Katsuki Bakugo, full of confidence, is then heard from the class. "Hey, Teach! Don't lump me in with all these losers. I'm going to be the top of the heap. This lot would be lucky to be a sidekick to some busted D-lister." His classmates react with angry glares and comebacks, but all of them recoil when Bakugo tells them to shut it. The teacher then said, "Oh, it seems that Bakugo is going for UA. And it seems that we also have 2 more students going out for UA. According to this sheet, we have both Aizawa and Midoriya signed up." Bakugo reacted with shock at this news. He thought to himself, "Those two, messing up my plans. I was supposed to be the first one from this crappy school to get into UA." Bakugo rushed to Midoriya's desk. He raised his hand over his head, intending to cause a small explosion on Midoriya's desk. But when his hand reached Midoriya's desk, all that happened was it hit the desk flat-palmed. Bakugo looked across the room and saw that Aizawa was glaring at him. Bakugo uttered through clenched teeth, "Aizawa." He hoofed it back to his desk. The moment of impact lost, thanks to Aizawa. After the class ended, Aizawa and Midoriya were talking about their plans for the afternoon. While the two talked, Midoriya was flipping through his hero notebook. "So Midoriya, I was thinking about our training going forward." Midoriya looked up from his notebook. "What about it, Aizawa?" Aizawa let out a breath. "The UA entrance exam is 8 months away. I think it'd be a good idea if we trained separately for that time." Aizawa worried what his sensitive friend would think of this idea. He worried that he would start crying rivers. But the response he got shocked him even more. "I think that would be a good idea, Aizawa. It would allow both of us to better focus on developing our skills." Midoriya looked at Aizawa with determination in his eyes. Aizawa found himself astounded by how much Midoriya had changed over the past 2 years. He was not the weak and shy boy he had taken under his wing. While Midoriya was not a social butterfly, he was far more confident and outgoing. He still had the annoying habit of going into long rants about heroes and quirks, but Aizawa had come to appreciate this trait in Midoriya. He had realized that was Midoriya's way of using his mind to make up for his lack of powers. Aizawa knew that to compete with individuals like Bakugo and protect himself and others from villains, Midoriya would need to use his mind to make up for his lack of powers. Of course, Aizawa could not overlook how much Midoriya had improved physically either. He had become far more athletic in the past 2 years. Aizawa would never admit it to his friend, but Midoriya's abilities surpassed his in many ways. While Aizawa was no weakling in the strength department, his build and personality had always been better suited for speed and agility. Midoriya was much more well-rounded. He had speed, strength, and agility. His fighting style was even more well-rounded. It was an even mix of punching, kicking, and takedown abilities. While Aizawa had won more matches than Midoriya during their training over the past 2 years, lately, Midoriya had become more of a force to be reckoned with. As these thoughts went through Aizawa's mind, Bakugo approached the pair. His eyes were full of resentment. Bakugo said, "What do you two think you're doing applying for UA? There's no way that they would take you two when they could have someone like me." Bakugo went to grab Midoriya by the shirt, but Midoriya grabbed his hand first. It took everything Bakugo had to not jump back in shock. Midoriya held Bakugo's wrist in a firm grip. He then looked Bakugo in the eye and said, "It is not your decision whether we take the UA entrance exam or not, Kachan. We are going to take it, and we are going to pass it." Midoriya held both Bakugo's eye and wrist for a few minutes to prove his point. He then looked at Aizawa and said, "Aizawa, I'll call you this weekend to tell you how my training is going. Good luck with yours, and work hard." Midoriya turned and left the room, leaving both Aizawa and Bakugo in stunned silence. The next time Aizawa heard from Midoriya was that weekend. Midoriya went into a long story about having met All Might. The great hero had seen potential in him to be a great hero and wanted to train him. As Aizawa listened to his friend fanboy out, he could tell that Midoriya was holding back something. This made Aizawa suspicious. But he also knew that if Midoriya was hiding something, he must have a reason for it. Aizawa told Midoriya that it sounded like a great opportunity. He told Midoriya to make sure that he made the training count. Aizawa spent the next 8 months studying, training, and trying to perfect his capture weapon combat style. His parents had been more than happy to pay for the support item. Aizawa had designed it himself. It played to his style of surprise attacks and speed. Aizawa met Midoriya outside of the UA campus. He could tell that Midoriya had been through some harsh training. The boys greeted each other and walked in together. As the boys walked into the building, Midoriya tripped over his own feet. Aizawa went to catch him, but Midoriya never hit the ground. When Aizawa looked back, he saw a short brunette girl with her hand on Midoriya's back. The girl smiled at the boys. "Sorry I used my quirk on you, but I figured that was better than letting you hit the pavement." The girl helped Midoriya find his footing. Midoriya responded to the girl. Thank you. Kind of got lost in my own head there. I'm Izuku Midoriya, and this serious fellow to my right is Shota Aizawa." The girl responded, "Nice to meet you two. I'm Ochaka Uraraka." Aizawa said, "Thank you for saving my clumsy friend." Midoriya said, "I'm sorry for troubling you." Uraraka said, "Oh, it's no problem. This test has us all on edge. Good luck on the test, you two." Midoriya stood in front of the building, lost in thought for a minute. Finally, Aizawa pulled him back to reality when he said, "Okay, Romeo, get your mind back on the business at hand." Midoriya smacked himself and said, "You're right, Aizawa. Let's get this test done." And with that, the boys walked into the building. The boys found themselves in an auditorium with the voice hero Present Mike at the podium. He explained how the practical portion of the exam would go. He told the students that they would be fighting faux villains. Each villain had its own point value, and they were to avoid the 0-pointers. Aizawa realized after hearing the rules that there must be more to the test than just combat. It made no sense for a hero course to focus solely on combat. As he thought about that, Present Mike told the students to go to their assigned combat stages. Aizawa stood outside of the most overbuilt factory stage he had ever seen. The doors to the stage opened. Present Mike came over the speakers and said, "Go, go, go! There are no starting signals in combat!" And with those words, Aizawa took off into the battlefield. The practical exam had begun. Aizawa ran into the factory battlefield. He quickly broke off from the pack of students and disappeared into the shadows. This is where Aizawa felt at home. After turning the corner in a back alley, Aizawa ran into a one-pointer robot. Aizawa wrapped the robot's arms up in his capture cloth. The robot started to reverse to escape from the young man. Aizawa struggled to keep the robot from escaping. Out of the corner of his eye, he saw a small switch on the robot's neck. Knowing there had to be a reason for this, Aizawa leapt towards the robot. Using his impressive agility, Aizawa ran up the wall and landed on the robot's back. He then quickly hit the switch, and the robot went limp. I thought so. Aizawa figured that the UA staff would have to get the applicants a way to deactivate the robots. After all, many of the applicants would not have quirks suited for combat. With this information, Aizawa took off once again. As he ran through the factory, he managed to take out several one-pointers, a few two-pointers, and even three-pointers. As he was looking for another robot to take out, he heard a loud scream. Oh crap! This thing is way tougher than I thought! Aizawa saw a blonde boy with a lightning bolt in his hair. The boy was trying to take down a three-point robot with an electric quirk. From what Aizawa could see, the electric boy was not having any luck taking down the robot. Aizawa thought it must have insulation to block such electric displays. The robot charged toward the electric blonde. Seeing this, Aizawa wrapped his capture weapon around an overhead pipeline. He used this to swing onto the top of the robot and flip the switch on the robot's head. Oh crap, that was close! Thank you so much! You saved my life! You're welcome. Try and be more aware of your opponents, and take this more seriously. With that, Aizawa charged off to find more robots. He found more robots to destroy and helped a few more people out. According to Aizawa's meticulous calculations, he had 30 villain points. Not the greatest score ever, but good considering his quirk was not a combat type. Aizawa also figured that he and the other applicants were being graded on other factors that they were not aware of. If that was the case, then he figured he was in good shape to pass the test. As Aizawa went looking for more robots, the ground began to rumble. In the area close to Aizawa, the huge zero-point robot emerged from the ground. It destroyed buildings and sent the test takers running for their lives. Aizawa figured that it would be completely irrational for him to go after that robot. After all, it had no point value, and his quirk would be of no use against it. As these thoughts flowed through Aizawa's head, he heard a voice from the direction of the robot. Damn, my ankle! A short girl with purple hair was lying on the ground, her ankle at an unnatural angle. Aizawa figured she twisted it when the robot emerged. From the look of it, there was no way for her to escape before the robot reached her. At that moment, Aizawa could hear the voice of his green-haired friend telling him to save the girl, because a hero never leaves anyone behind. Very much against his own rationale, Aizawa charged toward the girl. He wrapped her in his binding cloth and threw her over his shoulder. He then proceeded to run at top speed away from the robot. The purple-haired girl screamed at Aizawa, "What do you think you're doing? This is entrapment!" Aizawa managed to get clear of the robot's path. He then heard Present Mike announce that the test was over. The purple-haired girl then said, "Can you put me down and untie me?" After Aizawa untied her and laid her on the ground, the girl then said, deadpan, "Thank you for that." You're welcome. Just then, a sweet little old lady in a doctor's uniform entered the arena. Aizawa knew that this was the youthful hero Recovery Girl. He knew this because Midoriya spent the break during one of their weekend training sessions going on about her abilities at length. Recovery Girl then said, "You all did exceptionally good. I'm proud of each and every one of you. You're all winners in my book." She then looked over at the purple-haired girl, whose name was Kyoka Jiro. Recovery Girl then walked over to Jiro and laid a big grandma kiss on her. Jiro's horribly twisted ankle then righted itself. She was then able to stand. Jiro thanked Recovery Girl for fixing her ankle. She then turned to Aizawa and thanked him again for helping her escape from the zero-pointer. Aizawa looked at the purple-haired girl and said, "You're welcome." He then thought to himself that Midoriya may be a plain-looking guy, but his personality certainly affects a person. With that, the UA entrance exam ended. Several days passed after the exam. In the evening, Aizawa received a letter with a disc in it. Aizawa laid the disc on his desk and an image of a small, white, bear-like creature appeared. The creature said, "Hello there. It is everyone's favorite rat-dog-bear creature, Principal Nezu. I am proud to say that you, Shota Aizawa, have passed the UA entrance exam. You received 30 villain points. Normally, that would not be enough for you to pass, but there were other considerations. We were also judging you on your behavior during the test. If an applicant acted as a hero should, then he was awarded for it with rescue points. With that in mind, you, Aizawa, received 40 rescue points. We were quite impressed by this score considering that your quirk was not a combat type. We are proud to welcome you, Shota Aizawa, to the Hero Academia. Aizawa was not surprised by the information of rescue points. He figured that there was another dimension to the testing. Otherwise, you would have just gotten the best fighters, and there was more to being a hero than just fighting. Aizawa took notice of the leaderboard of test scores. In the first place slot were two familiar names. The first name was Katsuki Bakugo. This was no surprise to Aizawa. While he never cared for Bakugo's personality, he knew the guy was powerful and talented. What surprised Aizawa was the name that tied Bakugo. The other name was Izuku Midoriya, the name of his friend. Aizawa was stunned by this piece of information. He knew that Midoriya was a very capable fighter for his age. Aizawa had seen to that. But it was inconceivable to Aizawa that Midoriya not only passed, but tied with Bakugo for first place. Since he had completed the entrance exam, Aizawa had feared that his friend had failed the exam. Aizawa had barely passed, and he had a quirk and was far more intelligent than Midoriya. Aizawa wondered just what kind of training All Might had put his green-haired friend through. While this information was shocking to Aizawa, he doubted that UA would hand out scores based on sympathy. He would have to speak with Midoriya very soon about all of this. The next day, Aizawa went to Midoriya's house. His plan was to first commend his friend for scoring so well on the exam, and then to get the truth behind that high score. Aizawa knocked on the door to Midoriya's apartment. The door was answered by Inko Midoriya. "Oh, hello, Aizawa. I haven't seen you for a while." Aizawa almost smiled at the sight of the kindly Inko Midoriya. Since he had become friends with Izuku, it was not an uncommon occurrence for him to spend weekends at the Midoriya residence. Inko was grateful that Aizawa was looking out for Izuku when she could not. "How are you doing, Mrs. Midoriya? Is Izuku here?" Inko smiled at that comment. She responded, "He is. Do you want to come in while I get him?" "No, Mrs. Midoriya. Could you ask him if he can come out for a while? I wanted to congratulate him and take him to lunch to celebrate." "Oh, that sounds nice. I'll go get him for you." Izuku Midoriya came to the front door and greeted his friend. Aizawa explained his plans for the day to Midoriya. Izuku really liked the sound of this. He had not spent any time with Aizawa in months. So Midoriya agreed, and the two boys left Midoriya's apartment together. The two were walking along the street when Aizawa grabbed Izuku's shoulder. Aizawa yanked him into an empty alleyway. Aizawa then used all his strength to pin Midoriya to the alley wall. The dark-haired boy glared at Izuku and asked, "How did you score so highly on the entrance exam?" This sudden display of ultra-seriousness from Aizawa caused Izuku to freak out and panic a little. I guess I just got lucky, plus my training with All Might really helped me." Izuku was visibly sweating. The green-haired boy's eyes were bugging out. Aizawa knew that his friend was hiding something. "Look, with the skills that you have, you should have gotten closer to the bottom of the scores. But even with 10 years of training, you could not have tied for first. The test was just not designed for individuals like us to shine. So what's going on, Izuku?" Midoriya knew that Aizawa was worried and serious about wanting answers. Those were the only times that he called Midoriya by his first name. Midoriya was torn. He had promised All Might that he would not share his secret with anyone. The problem was, Aizawa was Midoriya's closest friend. Forget friend, he was more like a brother. And seeing the pain and worry on his brother's face was too much for Midoriya. "Okay, Shota, I'll tell you what's really going on, but we can't talk about it here." Aizawa was shocked by the serious look on Midoriya's face. "Okay, we can go to my house. My parents aren't home." "That will work." The boys walked quietly back to Aizawa's place. The whole time, Aizawa was wondering what information Midoriya could have that would cause him to be so serious. This thought troubled Aizawa. The boys arrived at Aizawa's house. As he said, his parents were nowhere to be seen. The boys seated themselves in the living room. It felt like the air itself weighed 1,000 pounds as Midoriya gathered his thoughts. Okay, Aizawa, what I'm about to tell you is going to sound impossible, but just hear me out. Okay, let's hear it. Midoriya then laid the whole secret out in front of Aizawa, how All Might's quirk was called One for All, and he could transfer it to someone else. How All Might decided to give him the quirk after the sludge villain attack. Then, how he spent the months before the entrance exam training to inherit the quirk. As Midoriya talked, Aizawa sat there in silence. Everything that Midoriya was telling him sounded irrational, like the wish of a desperate fanboy. But Aizawa knew that Midoriya was a hopeless hero fanboy, but he was not the kind of person to go around making up wild and outlandish stories. Also, Midoriya had always been straight with Aizawa, just like the dark-haired boy had been with Midoriya. Aizawa knew his friend would not be telling him this if it wasn't true. After a long silence, Aizawa spoke. The dark-haired boy said in a flat voice, "Midoriya, you should not have told me this." This answer shocked Midoriya. It took Midoriya several minutes to get over his shock. The green-haired boy then said, "I know that. I promised All Might that I would not tell a soul. But the thing is, Aizawa, you've been like a brother to me. I know in my heart that if I needed help, that you would do everything in your power to help me out. So, if there's one person that I can trust with this secret, it is you, Shoto Aizawa." Tears streamed down Midoriya's face as he uttered those words. Aizawa had to use all his willpower not to follow suit. Aizawa remained silent for a few moments. He thought over everything that Midoriya had told him. He then said to Midoriya, "I'll keep your secret, Izuku. If this information became public knowledge, it would be bad for everyone. However, you should tell All Might that you told me. After all, it's his secret too. He should know who is in on it." "All right, I will, Aizawa. I was supposed to meet him later today. Thank you for not calling me crazy, my friend." Midoriya let out a huge sigh of relief after saying his piece. Aizawa responded to this with his usual frankness. "I won't lie, everything you said has my head spinning. It flies in the face of how we think quirks work. But you were right when you said that I would do anything I could for you, Midoriya. I see you as a brother too. Let's get stronger together." Tears were now exiting Midoriya's eyes in waves. After he had calmed down a little, he said, "Okay, let's do it." Aizawa then asked Midoriya how far he had come in using One for All. Aizawa needed to know this information for his own sake. Midoriya then responded by saying that it would be easier to show him. The two boys went to Aizawa's training room. Midoriya then quickly stretched his body. He then took a pose, and his body became taut. Midoriya then zipped across the room at incredible speed. One for All is powerful. For now, I can only use about 10% of its power. But I can spread that power throughout my body. That increases my overall power. I call this full cowling. This is the main way that I scored so highly on the entrance exam. Oh, by the way, I should thank you, Aizawa. If not for your physical training over the years, I wouldn't have gotten this far with this power. All Might told me that if my body had not been in such good shape already, then he would not have been able to pass the quirk to me so soon. Because of that, I was able to get used to the quirk." Aizawa was stunned at this sight. Hearing about All Might's power was one thing, but seeing it was another. Midoriya was a capable enough individual before. Now that he had a quirk like this, he was going to be a real monster. Aizawa knew that he had to redouble his own efforts to keep up with his friend. A week flew by as both Aizawa and Midoriya found themselves outside of the main gate to UA. To say that both boys were nervous would be the understatement of the year. The boys walked down the hallways. The doors and ceilings seemed to be made to accommodate giants. These facts did not take away from the fear that the boys felt inside. Aizawa wore his usually impassive, sleepy glare on his face. This hid the uneasy feelings he was having. Midoriya, though, was nowhere near as good at hiding his feelings. The green-haired boy was in a full-on ramble as they walked toward their homeroom. Both boys were suddenly jarred from their thoughts when they saw the door marked with a huge 1A across the wood. The boys stood in front of the door. They were both a little nervous to enter. "Don't worry, I'm sure everyone here is nice." Aizawa wondered if Midoriya was saying this to reassure him, or making a prayer out loud, hoping it would come true. Aizawa took a deep breath and said, "Well, the only way we're gonna know is if we open the door and go in." With that line, Aizawa grabbed the door handle and slid the door open. Aizawa slid the door to Class 1A open. The two boys could hear two voices having an argument. Upon entering the room, the boys saw that the argument was between Bakugo and a blue-haired boy. The blue-haired boy was telling Bakugo to take his feet off the desk. Bakugo was his usual abrasive self, telling the blue-haired boy that he had a stick shoved up his butt. Aizawa was not surprised by this sight. He had known Bakugo long enough to expect this kind of behavior from him. At the same time, Aizawa thought that the blue-haired boy looked familiar. "Midoriya, is that guy with the glasses the one that told you to stop fanboying out during the entrance exam?" Aizawa said this statement in a more quizzical manner. "Yes, he was my friend." Midoriya stated this with a nervous energy in his voice. As the two boys were talking, the blue-haired boy noticed their presence. He then walked over to them. "It's you. My name is Tenya Ida. I wanted to apologize to you. I thought that you were a simple fanboy, but the way you handled yourself in the exam shows that you are indeed a student worthy of UA." Ida moved his hands in a very robotic fashion while he said these things to Midoriya. "Also, how did you know about the rescue points?" Midoriya said earnestly, "Thank you, Ida, it was. I accept your apology. The truth is that I had no idea about the rescue points." Ida replied, "But the way you took down that robot to save the brown-haired girl, and all the damage you took, are you saying you did all of that?" "I just reacted." Midoriya said this as a matter of fact. After hearing this information, Ida's jaw dropped and his eyes bulged out of his head. His face was a mask of hyper-animated shock. While Ida may have been shocked by this fact, Aizawa was not. He knew that Midoriya had a habit of jumping into situations without thinking. It was one of Midoriya's most noble character features, but it was also extremely infuriating. During all this interaction, Aizawa just stood beside Midoriya in silence. All this high energy was not his cup of tea. A feminine voice came from behind Midoriya and Aizawa. The voice said in an excited tone, "I know that messy hair. It's you, Midoriya, the falling boy." Both boys turned around to see the girl that they had met outside the entrance exam building. Midoriya got a shocked look on his face, but then realized who it was. He responded after a few seconds with, "Oh, hello, Uraraka. Nice to see you again. I wanted to thank you for offering to give your points to me." After hearing that, Uraraka got a curious look on her face. She then asked Midoriya, "How did you know about that?" Midoriya then tried to explain. Before he could, Uraraka started asking Midoriya questions about how the day would go. While the brunt carried on about orientation, Aizawa suddenly felt a tapping on his shoulder. He turned around to see the face of Kyoko Jiro. "Hi there, Aizawa. A rather rowdy group, aren't they?" "They certainly are, Jiro." Aizawa was glad to see that Jiro got in. As the two emo students conversed, the electric blonde that Aizawa had met in the exam came up and introduced himself as Denki Kaminari. Just as the students were getting to know each other, the back door to the classroom slid open. All Might entered the room while striking a pose. The number one hero then said with an impossible level of energy, "I am here, sneaking in the back door." The sight of the number one hero sent the whole class into a state of shock. None of the students knew what to say. Uraraka was the first to voice the excitement they all felt when she said, "All Might really is working here? Wow, you're even more muscly in person." All Might then spoke. "I am so glad to see that this new class has such enthusiasm. I will be your homeroom teacher." At this statement, the class was once again rendered speechless. Even the usually reserved Aizawa was surprised by this news. The students did not know how to deal with this fact. They knew the number one hero in the world would be teaching at UA this year, but they did not dare think that he would be their homeroom teacher, the one person who would be responsible for guiding them through their 3 years of training at UA. All Might said, "All right, everyone, I want you to put on one of these lovely gym uniforms, then head out to the practice field." The powerful hero held up the school gym uniform like a trained pitchman. Uraraka reacted to this statement with extreme concern. "But what about orientation? We are going to miss it if we do that, All Might, sir." All Might remarked,
Here at UA, we do not stand on tradition. That means I get to run this class the way I see fit. So don't worry about it, young Uraraka."
The number one hero gave the brunette a big thumbs up after that explanation. The class then went off to the locker rooms to change. The class then gathered on the practice field. All Might then said,
"Each of you has taken many tests in school, but the one thing that none of you has done is use your quirks to their fullest. A shortcoming of the current education system, to be sure. But you have 3 years at UA to develop your powers to combat villains and natural or man-made disasters. Understand that these enemies will not care who you are or what your power is. All they see is an enemy who is in their way. That is the job of a hero, to be a pillar of support for the hopes and dreams of the people and other heroes. So use your time here to go beyond, plus ultra."
All Might let this speech sink in. He could tell that it hit these students hard. All Might then added,
"Today you will take part in a series of physical tests. Use your quirks freely to help you get better results."
He then tossed a soft ball to Katsuki Bakugo. All Might then asked Bakugo,
"Young Bakugo, what was your furthest throw with a softball?" 30 meters, I guess,"
Bakugo responded.
"Try throwing it with your quirk now."
All Might gave him a thumbs up at the suggestion. Bakugo needed a little incentive. He pulled his arm back and released his throw. As he released his throw, he unleashed a huge explosion that propelled the softball into the sky. All Might showed his phone that had a distance app on it. The app showed that Bakugo's throw hit 725 meters. The whole of Class 1A reacted in amazement at the fiery display. All Might replied,
"Nice job, young Bakugo. Now that you all get how the test will work, let us get started. Know that the person who comes in last place will be held after for special training. I expect you all to go beyond, plus ultra. Show me that your acceptance into the UA was no mistake, young heroes."
He said the word special with an evil enthusiasm that made the students very concerned. With that energizing speech, the boys and girls of Class 1A were ready to give it their all. After all, they had all come to UA to become the best heroes they could be. Aizawa was impressed by All Might's approach to testing the students' capability. It was the most rational approach. But he did worry how he would measure up. His quirk had no physical applications. But, like All Might said, villains are not going to care about details like that. Aizawa gave his all to each test. But since his quirk had no physical effects on his body, he still came in last place. Midoriya, however, being able to use 10% of One for All in full cowling, was able to get very impressive scores in each of the tests. In fact, he tied with Bakugo for second place. Both boys were beaten out of the top spot by Momo Yaoyorozu. The fact that Midoriya tied with him and that he was outdone for first place sent Bakugo into a rage. He flew at Midoriya, calling him deku. The blonde yelled at the green-haired boy to tell him how a quirkless loser tied with him. This confrontation was stopped when All Might grabbed Bakugo with his large, muscular hand and lifted him off the ground to be eye level with him. All Might then told Bakugo,
"That is enough, young Bakugo. This behavior is shameful for an aspiring hero. Give me 500 laps of the field without using your quirk."
Bakugo huffed off to do the laps. All Might then turned to the rest of the class. The number one hero said,
"You all did marvelously today. Now, you all have a better idea of how to use your quirks. You also know what areas you need to improve in physically. As for the special training..." Again, the way he said the word special made the class cringe in terror. "I will discuss that more tomorrow. Until then, you are dismissed for today. Pick up a syllabus in the class and read it over before tomorrow."
As the class turned to leave, All Might asked Midoriya and Aizawa to meet him in the teacher's lounge after they changed. The rest of Class 1A was puzzled by this. When the boys arrived in the teacher's lounge, All Might had a serious look on his muscular face. He then said to Aizawa,
"Young Midoriya told me that he told you the secret of his power. I was a little bit worried about this, but Midoriya has only the highest praise of your person. But I must ask that you keep this secret, even from your classmates. If this information were to get out, then not only would young Midoriya be in danger, but anyone connected to him."
Aizawa then said,
"Thank you for stating the obvious, sir. Like I told Midoriya, you can count on me. I will not tell a soul."
All Might responded,
"Thank you, Aizawa. Now that is out of the way, I should show you this. All Might then changed into his weak form. Aizawa stood there with an unsurprised look on his face. Sir, Midoriya also told me about your weak form. Though I have to say, it is one thing to hear about it and another to see it in person. I will keep this a secret too. The lack of emotion on the dark-haired boy's face surprised All Might. All Might then stated, Your quirk is an interesting case, Aizawa, but its applications are such that it could be extremely useful. I plan to have special instructions for you, so you can develop your power to its fullest. Aizawa thanked the blonde hero for that. The three then conversed a little more, so All Might could get to know more about Aizawa. He then sent the boys on their way. Both boys headed back to the classroom. When they arrived, they were met by a flurry of questions from their energetic classmates. The boys told them that All Might wanted to discuss special quirk training for the two boys. For Midoriya, since he had just recently came into his power, and Aizawa, since his power could not be trained in the normal way. The classmates were satisfied with this answer. After a little socializing, the class then went to leave the school for the day. As Midoriya and Aizawa were heading to the train station, they heard a feminine voice say, Midoriya! Aizawa! The boys looked back to see both Ida and Uraraka walking toward them. Uraraka then asked the boys if they were heading to the train station and if they wanted to walk together. Midoriya said that they would like that. Aizawa just gave an emotionless huff. So the four students walked off to the train station. Uraraka remarked, Hey, Midoriya, what does deku mean? Midoriya got a shocked look on his face at the mention of the title. He then said to the pink-cheeked girl, That is a name that Bakugo gave me when we were kids, to make fun of the fact that I didn't have a quirk. Ida then said, Bakugo would make fun of a fellow classmate. How shameful. As he said this, the blue-haired boy moved his arms in a robotic manner. Uraraka replied, Well, I think that deku sounds kind of cute. I think it would make a great hero name. At this statement, Midoriya responded, Deku it is then. This reaction confused Ida. Aizawa understood what was going on. His green-haired friend had always been very transparent with his feelings. It was an aspect of Midoriya's character that was refreshing and annoying at the same time. Looking at the interaction, he did not think that his friend had romantic feelings for Uraraka yet. In fact, knowing his friend the way he did, he figured that it had not occurred to Midoriya that a girl would even like him that way. But even knowing that, Aizawa could see that the two were interested in each other. He decided not to say anything yet. After all, he barely knew Uraraka. He decided to keep an eye on this and decide on what to do later. That would be the most rational thing to do. As the four students walked, one topic dominated the conversation. The topic was what would their second day at UA bring, since the first had been so eventful. The answer that the group came to was that all they could do was meet the challenge head-on and go beyond.
The students of Class 1A gathered in their homeroom, wondering what new challenges awaited them today. They were also worried about All Might's special training for the low scores on the quirk test. All Might entered the room in his usual goofy way and began the class.
All right, class. First, let me say that I promised that those that received low scores on the quirk test would receive special training. But I was so impressed by your performance yesterday that the low scores are safe.
The low scores, which included Jiro, Kaminari, Koda, and Hagakure, gasped in relief. None of them were looking forward to the kind of training such a buff hero could put them through. All Might then continued.
Instead, everyone gets special training!
The class then roared in outrage at this statement. After the class had calmed down to a dull roar, All Might zipped around the room at high speed. He deposited a pamphlet on each of the students' desks.
As you all know, I talked with young Midoriya and Aizawa the other day about placing them in special training to properly develop their quirks. After that discussion, I realized that while this class is full of potential, you will all not reach your full potential if I go easy on you. So I stayed up late last night making these impressive training schedules for each of you. I call this my Aim to Pass American Dream Plan.
Class 1A marveled at how detailed the plans were. It included everything from their diets to their studying time.
These plans are custom-made to fit each of you. I developed these based not only on the results of the quirk test, but also on your student files. Each of these plans has been made so that your progress over the next year will be swift but manageable. It will be super hard. I hope you are ready for this, Class 1A.
All Might then gave a thumbs up to his class. Aizawa looked through his plan. Sticking to this plan would be extremely difficult, but not impossible. Aizawa found that the plan was very rational. Given that All Might tended to act so ridiculous most of the time, Aizawa was impressed that he had created such a well-thought-out regiment. Aizawa then looked around the classroom. He could see that the scope of what they were about to go through was dawning on his classmates. The dark-haired boy saw that Kaminari was in full freak-out mode. Jiro seemed pensive, and the invisible girl seemed to have lost her mind. Then Aizawa looked at the front of the class and saw both Midoriya and Bakugo. These two were not worried, but determined. It seemed that many of their classmates noticed this reaction. The whole class then shifted to being more stoked for the coming year. As the class came to grips with their new training plans, All Might spoke again.
Now that all of that is out of the way, we have some very important business to tend to.
A huge smile broke out across All Might's face.
Today, we start your Hero Academia with combat training.
The class went from nervous to excited. The more enthusiastic members of 1A jumped from their seats to exclaim their joy. Bakugo rose from his seat and said that he would defeat every one of his classmates. This statement was received with less joy. All Might then cleared his throat.
It is important that if you are going to be heroes, that you look the part.
The blonde hero then hit a button on his desk that opened panels on the wall of the classroom. The opened panels revealed suitcases with numbers on them.
These are your hero costumes. They were made from the designs you submitted with your entrance paperwork. Now go get changed and meet at Field Beta.
The number one hero said all of this with the large amount of enthusiasm that the students had come to expect from the blonde hero. The students then regrouped at Field Beta as instructed. They entered the battle stage in their costumes in a very heroic fashion. Uraraka then commented, "Deku, I really like your costume. I wish I'd been more detailed in my design. This tight fit is not really my thing." The round-faced girl said this while blushing and rubbing the back of her head. Aizawa could tell that Midoriya had the same thought. He remained quiet at the girl's comment. He did not think that it was rational to make a comment on a comment, and he was interested in seeing what his green-haired friend would say to the pink-cheeked girl. Midoriya took a deep breath and responded, "Actually, I think that the space theme goes really, really well with your gravity quirk. The color scheme is very iconic, and I think it makes you look really cute." This comment caused the brunette to blush fiercely. She managed to say, "Thank you, Deku."
All right, you two. We need to focus.
Aizawa was decked out in a black jumpsuit, black boots, his capture weapon around his neck, and a utility belt around his waist. "Aizawa, your costume is kind of dark. You look like a ninja." Uraraka had a puzzled look on her face. Aizawa glared at the girl in irritation.
It was the most rational design. I do not plan on being a flash hero in the public eye. Any resemblance it has to a ninja is just a happy coincidence.
Both Midoriya and Uraraka stared at Aizawa with questioning looks on their faces. All Might then broke up the friendly banter.
Welcome to Field Beta, Class 1A. Don't all of you look heroic?
All Might repressed the urge to comment that Midoriya's costume made him look like a cross between himself and Gumby. All Might then whipped out a piece of paper from his pocket and read the directions for the exercise. The class would be divided into pairs. The teams would then be divided into heroes and villains. The villains would protect a bomb in an enclosed room. The hero team would then have to capture the villains with capture tape or grab the weapon to win. The villains would win if the 15-minute time limit ran out or the heroes were captured. "Sir, wouldn't it be better if we did this in the open rather than in a building?"
The news and other media always show heroes and villains in battle in the open. The truth is that most confrontations take place indoors. Dark basements, shady back rooms, abandoned warehouses. Plus, this exercise will help you learn how to use your quirks effectively in confined space.
The frog girl nodded her head in understanding. All Might then had the students draw lots to divide them into teams. Deku was teamed with Uraraka, which made the green-haired boy incredibly happy. Aizawa was teamed up with a tall girl with a long black ponytail. The girl's name was Momo Yaoyorozu. This happened because Mineta did not get into Class 1A, because Aizawa passed the entrance test with higher scores. All Might then placed a black box and a white box in front of the class. The muscular hero then drew a ball with a number on each one. This would determine who played the hero and who played the villain. The drawing had the team of Midoriya and Uraraka playing the heroes, and Bakugo and Ida playing the villains. The rest of the students were told that they could watch the matches from the observation room with All Might. As Aizawa retreated to the observation room, a sinister smile covered his face. He thought to himself that this was Midoriya's chance to show Bakugo just how far he had come. This should be an interesting match. Midoriya and Uraraka stood outside the building where their classmates hid their explosive payload. The tension of the situation was starting to get to Midoriya. "Hey Deku, this is kind of exciting, isn't it?" The round-faced girl then looked over at Deku. Her tone went straight to panic. "Whoa, what's wrong? You're sweating through your costume!" Midoriya was trembling when he stated, This is the first time I have faced Kacchan in a head-to-head battle like this. It makes me nervous, but at the same time, I'm also excited by the chance. I want to show Kacchan that I'm a new person, a new Deku." The words from the green-haired boy moved Uraraka. His words had a strange power that made her want to win this exercise. "Let's win this, Deku! After what I saw you do at the entrance exam and the quirk test, I know we can win!" Uraraka's words had a certainty that would have made Bakugo seem mellow. The brunette's words energized Midoriya with a new confidence. "Okay, Uraraka, let's do this! All right!" And with that exclamation, the two teammates entered the building through a first-floor window. Both Midoriya and Uraraka crept around the first few floors for several minutes. Their plan was to find the base of their enemies in the large building and then ambush them. Their plan was going fine until a loud voice rang through the empty hallways. "Deku, where are you hiding? Come out and face me, you weakling!" Back in the observation room, Aizawa was watching the match unfold. It did not surprise Aizawa that Bakugo opted for the head-on approach, though Aizawa did think that Bakugo's decision was highly irrational. But Aizawa knew from the look on Bakugo's face that he was not thinking rationally. He was probably determined to prove his strength and dominance over Midoriya in this exercise. What is he thinking? Bakugo is all about fighting. In his mind, being a hero means facing a challenge head-on. It would be an admirable quality, if not for his abrasive personality. Seems to me like he's really full of himself. That too. On the battlefield, Midoriya grabbed Uraraka's shoulder. This action made the brunette flinch. Deku pulled the girl in close and told her in a hushed tone, "Uraraka, I'm going to confront Kacchan. You sneak off while he's distracted." "But wouldn't it be better if we attacked him together?" "No. If we both stayed and confronted him, then the clock would probably run out. If we went around him to find Ida, then he could attack us from behind. Me taking him on is the best solution for now. Go find Ida and radio me when you do." Uraraka nodded and turned the corner and went up a flight of stairs to the next floor. Midoriya walked out from his hiding place. "I am here, Kacchan! Let's do this!" Midoriya stood confidently with his hands raised in front of him in a fighting pose. "Deku, you worthless weakling! I don't know what the power of yours is, but it's not enough to make you better than me!" Bakugo's eyes were searing with pure rage as the words exited his mouth. Bakugo used his explosions to propel himself toward Midoriya. The blonde teen reached out with his right hand to deliver an explosive strike to Midoriya's side. But Bakugo was surprised that Midoriya caught his blow before it landed. "Call me Deku all you want, Kacchan. I'm not going to be your punching bag anymore. From now on, Deku is the name of a hero!" With that, Midoriya delivered a powerful punch to Bakugo's gut. The atomic blonde grasped his stomach and retreated down the hall. The thought of Midoriya being this strong was inconceivable to him. He always thought of Midoriya as a bug that he could have crushed at any time. Bakugo refused to believe that a quirkless loser could be his equal. It must be a trick.
So strong now. If that's the case, then I don't have to hold back.
Bakugo raised his bracers. He explained that they were designed to store his explosive sweat so he could make bigger explosions. All Might then came onto Bakugo's earpiece to reprimand the boy.
Bakugo, letting off a huge explosion like this is extremely dangerous to you and your classmates. Don't do it. The nerd will be fine if he dodges.
With that comment, Bakugo let off a massive explosion that engulfed the whole hallway in fire and ash. Back in the observation room, Aizawa and the rest of the class were dumbstruck by the sight. Denki Kaminari was the first to speak.
Do you think they're all right?
Aizawa recovered from his shock and regained his rational composure.
All Might, sir, can you get a different camera angle?
All Might then hit some buttons on the console, and a different camera came into view. What the camera showed was more shocking than the explosion. It showed Midoriya standing over a hog-tied Bakugo, with the hallway being totally wrecked from the explosion. Wondering how that happened, All Might rewound the recording and played it at super slow motion. The recording showed that the moment that Bakugo pulled the pin on his bracers, Midoriya had a burst of speed. He came up behind Bakugo and landed several hits on the blonde. The green-haired boy then restrained the bomb-palmed boy with capture tape. Aizawa knew that Midoriya had improved greatly since inheriting One for All, but what he saw on the tape was extraordinary. Aizawa was going to triple his efforts if he was going to keep up. As Aizawa looked around the room, he could see that his classmates were having the same thought. Back on the field, Midoriya stood over the disabled Bakugo. The green-haired boy's radio buzzed to life in his ear. "Deku, are you all right? What was that loud noise?"
"I'm all right, Uraraka. That was the sound of me taking down Kachan."
"Have you found Ida and the bomb?" "I'm glad you're okay. I found Ida in the device on the 6th floor, but he kind of found me. Do you think you can come help? I can't get close to him. He's just too fast."
"Okay, I'm on my way."
Midoriya then took off at full speed. He took the stairs to the 6th floor. He then followed the noise of the confrontation and got an idea.
"Uraraka, where are you in the room?"
Midoriya called on his radio. "I'm against the back wall, opposite the door."
"Good. When I give the signal, either grab the bomb or disable Ida, whichever one seems fastest. You will only have a moment, so be quick."
"Okay, but what is the signal?"
"You'll know it when you see it."
Ida continued to dodge around the room, keeping the bomb out of reach of Uraraka. Just as the brunette thought the time was going to run out, the entire wall came crashing into the room. Uraraka thought that must be the signal. She then ran toward the confused Ida and placed her hand on his chest armor. The blue-haired boy then floated 2 feet off the ground. He was then restrained with capture tape by both Midoriya and Uraraka. And with that, the exercise ended. At that point, Midoriya grabbed his arm. His face wore an expression of extreme discomfort. It was discovered that Midoriya had received several microfractures to his arms and legs. All Might told Midoriya to go see Recovery Girl. Once the green-haired boy was healed, he could return to the observation room. With that, Midoriya went off to Recovery Girl, while Bakugo, Uraraka, and Ida returned to the observation room. All Might asked,
"So, class, who do you think the MVP of this exercise was?"
Momo Yaoyorozu stepped forward with the answer.
"Sir, the MVP of this exercise is Tenya Ida. Let me explain. While Midoriya and Uraraka did win the exercise with excellent teamwork, they both made major mistakes. Midoriya was able to disable Bakugo, but only after Bakugo dealt massive damage to the building. Such actions could have endangered lives. Bakugo's major mistake was using such a large attack in a confined area. Such a move undermined his team's objective. Uraraka's poor composure gave away her presence to the enemy, but Ida took the exercise seriously. He prepared his area to face his opponents and acted accordingly when he was discovered. While Ida's team did lose, he was the only one who accomplished the goals of this exercise." The whole class stood dumbfounded at Yaoyorozu's analysis of the battle. Aizawa himself was most impressed by the breakdown of events. It was a most rational review. He liked that. All Might was left speechless.
He managed to regain his composure enough to comment.
Well, you missed a few points. Like Ida could have relaxed a bit. Other than that, good job.
The matches then continued. Finally, Midoriya returned from Recovery Girl. His costume was missing both gloves and sleeves. Both his arms were bandaged up to his shoulders. But other than that, the green-haired boy seemed to be in good shape. Aizawa said,
"In one piece again?"
Midoriya responded, "Yeah, used a little too much power against Kacchan. I need to be more careful until my body can take more." Aizawa approved of Midoriya's overview of his performance. The sleepy-eyed boy gave the green-haired boy a simple nod of approval. Aizawa needed to focus on his own match. He was teamed with Yaoyorozu. The two serious students would face off against Jiro and Kaminari. Uraraka saw Midoriya enter the room and waved to him. "Hey, Deku, good to see that you're healed up." "Yeah, Recovery Girl healed me, but told me that I had to be more careful in the future." "So what about the next match? Who's fighting against who?" "Well, this is the last match. Aizawa and Yaoyorozu are going against Jiro and Kaminari. I wonder which team will win. Both sides seem pretty equal." Knowing Aizawa as well as I do, he will already have a plan on how to deal with Jiro and Kaminari. "You really think so, Deku?" "Yeah, when it comes to quick applications, Aizawa may be even better at it than Kacchan." With this surprising assessment, the final match began. On the field, Aizawa and Yaoyorozu discussed the best plan of action for this exercise. Yaoyorozu believed that their best bet was to barricade the door and let the clock run down, since their opponents had no real way of breaking into a locked room. Aizawa agreed with this plan, but he suggested one change.
"You barricade the entrances once I enter the hallways. Your quirk will let you defend the device better than mine will. It's more rational for me to try to disable our opponents before they arrive. My quirk and fighting style are best fit for sneak attacks, not head-on assaults."
Yaoyorozu was impressed by the dark-haired boy's proposal. She agreed to his change in plan. So Aizawa took to the shadows of the dimly lit building, and Yaoyorozu fortified their base. Jiro and Kaminari entered the building. Jiro used her quirk to seek out the location of her opponents. She could hear that someone was approaching their location. She told Kaminari to be ready. As the punk girl said those words, a flash grenade landed at their feet and went off. The burst of light blinded the two students. Kaminari then heard Jiro shout in defiance. When his eyesight returned, the purple-haired girl was gone. Kaminari started to freak out. The electric teen looked around the dark hallway, wondering what was going on. It was then that Aizawa lowered himself from the ceiling on his capture scarf like a deranged Spider-Man. He came down just behind Kaminari.
"Got you."
And with those two words, Aizawa wrapped Kaminari from neck to ankles in his capture scarf. The yellow-haired boy began to scream at the top of his lungs. Aizawa completed the capture by wrapping the capture tape around Kaminari's mouth to shut the panicking teen up. Aizawa then hit his radio and contacted Yaoyorozu.
"Both heroes have been disabled. We won."
All Might signaled that Aizawa and Yaoyorozu had won the match. Aizawa unwrapped Jiro and Kaminari from their bindings. The four students then rejoined their class and teacher in the observation room.
"Good job, everyone. But the MVP of this exercise is young Aizawa. You managed to disable your opponent quickly. This allowed your team to win the exercise. Jiro and Kaminari, keep in mind that villains will do anything to succeed, even kill you. So you must expect anything and everything in any situation."
All Might paused to let his advice sink in. He then raised his hand in a thumbs-up gesture.
"Good job today, everyone! You showed just how much potential you have as heroes. But you also showed just how much work you have left to do."
The class was honored by the #1 hero's praise.
"Now, let me teach you one last thing. How a hero exits a room! Like he has somewhere to be."
The buff hero then took off running, leaving a cloud of smoke in his wake. Class 1A made their way to the locker rooms to change out of their costumes. Aizawa still thought that All Might was a glory-seeking fool, and that his teaching methods were amateurish, but his methods were effective. This exercise had gotten the students to cooperate with each other in ways that heroes would have to. He was eager to see what the #1 hero had planned for the rest of the year. The students of Class 1A converged on the UA campus to begin a new day of hero training. All of them had been motivated by the quirk test and the combat training to go beyond, plus ultra. The students of 1A noticed a large group of people surrounding the UA gates as they approached the campus. It turned out that it was hordes of reporters. All of them were looking to get an interview with All Might. As the students neared the gates, they were swarmed by the reporters. The reporters asked the students to share any information they could about All Might and how he was dealing with being a teacher. Most of the students were either put off by the attention or they reveled in it. A reporter went to interview Aizawa. The poor woman freaked out at the sight of his face. She said that he looked sleep-deprived and needed a nap. Aizawa was used to these remarks, but the fact that these reporters were blocking their way to class lit a fuse in the usually calm boy. "You vultures need to find someone else to bother. You're interrupting our studies," Aizawa said, with a voice full of malice. The emotion in his voice shocked most of his classmates. The only one not surprised was Midoriya. The green-haired boy knew that his friend did not like the media or heroes that sought them out. This is the main reason that he never liked All Might. The other students followed Aizawa's lead out of the fear of the dark aura he was giving off. The students entered the campus as the crowd of reporters parted for the dark-haired boy. One overly determined reporter tried to follow the students onto the campus. The poor reporter was met by the UA barrier rising from the ground. This blocked any hope of the reporters getting the interview they so desperately wanted. The students of Class 1A had left the incident at the front gate behind them. They all engaged in social interaction while waiting for the bell to ring and class to begin. All Might entered the room just before the bell rang.
"I am here, coming into the room, like a hero!"
He stood in the front of the room with his muscles flexed in a dynamic pose. All Might stood behind the podium at the front of the class. The #1 hero then began class.
"Let me start by saying that I was incredibly pleased by the results of your combat training yesterday. A few points, though. Bakugo, you need to control your emotions, young man. Using your emotion to power you forward can be helpful, but getting blinded by them will lead you to disaster. Midoriya, you showed amazing power in the exercise, but you received several injuries that had to be healed. Build yourself up and control your power usage. It is no good to take down a villain if you break yourself doing it."
These comments settled over the two boys. They both knew that the #1 hero's critique was accurate.
"Now, you have something very important to do today,"
All Might said, with such force and seriousness that it made the members of 1A tremble with worry. All Might then said,
"You all need to pick a class president!"
The class went from silent horror to ecstatic glee. Usually the position of class president was just a formality, but at UA, it showed that you were capable of leading others and could mean you get placed at a top agency after graduation. All Might left the room to take care of some business and left the class to decide. Immediately, everyone started volunteering for the position. Aizawa was the only one who stayed quiet during this display. While the dark-haired boy understood how this position could impact his future, he did not desire it. Aizawa knew that his energy should be focused on training and studying to become the best hero he could. Plus, he was not the kind to lead from the front. The whole scene was interrupted by Tenya Ida. The blue-haired boy interjected,
"We should vote for the class president."
Everyone was surprised by this suggestion.
Won't everyone just vote for themselves, Ida? I mean, we just met each other. How do we know who we can trust with such a position?
Ida replied with a robotic gesture.
"I know that, but think about it. If anyone does receive multiple votes, then that must mean that they are capable of leading the class."
Aizawa could see the rationale in Ida's proposal. He could see that Ida did want the job for himself, but he was the only one who presented a plan. He could see that Midoriya also had his eye on being class president. The responsibility could be good for Midoriya and could help him become the hero he wanted to be. This was not going to be an easy decision for Aizawa to make. As the votes were tallied, Midoriya got 3 votes, which made him class president, and Momo Yaoyorozu got 2 votes, making her the vice president. As Midoriya stood at the front of the class, trembling from the weight of his new position, the lunch bell rang. Aizawa sat in the lunchroom with Midoriya, Ida, and Uraraka. The friends enjoyed the delicious lunches by the pro-hero lunch rush. Both Ida and Uraraka questioned Midoriya about being named class president. Ida, you must be disappointed about the election. I know you were aiming for the position. I mean, you look like a class president. With the glasses, I mean.
Uraraka, I don't think that you should base your vote on if someone wears glasses.
Midoriya gave a nervous laugh at his friend's frankness. Wow, tell it like it is, Shota. Aizawa gave no notice to the comment and continued to eat his lunch. Ida then said,
One day I hope to lead others, but I'm not ready for that yet. I learned about that being around the Ida Family Hero Agency.
That reminds me, Ida, I've been meaning to ask about your family. Tell us, admit it, you're super rich, aren't you? Midoriya and Uraraka gazed at Ida with wide sparkling eyes. Aizawa was interested to hear the answer, but he maintained his aloof expression.
I was hoping to keep my family a secret. It makes things harder when people learn who my family is.
Ida then took a deep breath.
Have either of you heard of the turbo hero, Ingenium?
Midoriya then fanboyed out and explained who Ingenium was and all of his stats. Ida stood up proudly and proclaimed that Ingenium was his older brother. The blue-haired boy then listed off the hero's virtues. As Ida carried on, Aizawa and Midoriya realized that Ingenium was for Ida what All Might was for Midoriya. These heroes symbolized and embodied the kind of heroes that these boys wanted to be. Aizawa's internal monologue was interrupted when Uraraka said, So, speaking of parents, Aizawa, what do yours do? Aizawa did not talk about his parents much. The relationship between him and his parents was very formal. They would see that he was fed and clothed, he would honor their requests when he could, not that they ever asked anything of him. After the years of being around Midoriya and his mother Inko, the dark-haired teen had begun to realize just how small his feelings were for his parents. Over the years, he had begun to look at both Midoriya and Inko as his real family. Aizawa broke out of his train of thought and responded to the brunette's question.
My parents work in support tech development. My father is a high-ranking executive at a support company, and my mother develops new materials that are used to build costumes and support items.
Oh, that sounds cool. Is that where you got that awesome scarf?
It isn't a scarf. It's a custom-made capture weapon.
Aizawa's eyes turned red in frustration. Just as Uraraka was about to respond, an alarm sounded. All the students in the lunchroom started to freak out. The alarm meant that the school's security had been breached. Every student flooded the hallways to reach the safe areas. Because of this, the hall became cramped and impassable. Ida became pressed against the windows and saw that the threat was just a bunch of reporters. Ida quickly formed a plan. He reached for Uraraka, and she made him float. He then used his engines to maneuver in midair. He reached the top of the main doorway. He placed his feet on the doorway and grabbed an overhanging pipe to steady himself. This made him look like the figure on an emergency exit. Ida then yelled over the crowd of panicked students. He told them that everything was fine. The threat was only a bunch of reporters. This made everyone calm down. Later, Class 1A had returned to their homeroom. Midoriya stood in the front of the class to choose the class officers. Before we choose the class officers, I think we should name Tenya Ida class president. The way he responded to the emergency and got everyone to listen to him was amazing. That is the type of person we need to lead this class. The other students were hesitant at first, but they all agreed that Midoriya had a point. All Might then declared that Tenya Ida would be president and Momo Yaoyorozu would be a vice president. This did rub Yaoyorozu the wrong way. After all, she received 2 more votes than Ida. The day ended with Principal Nezu and the other UA staff members standing beside a destroyed piece of the UA barrier. The section looked like it had been dissolved into dust. The sight of this left the group of educators wondering if it was a warning or a first assault. The next afternoon, Class 1A gathered in the classroom. They wondered what training awaited them. All Might entered the classroom and announced that they would be performing rescue training. All Might then gestured to the class for silence.
Today we will be going to an off-site location, so get changed into your costumes and meet at the bus stop.
The group changed and boarded the bus. As the bus drove toward the mystery destination, the students discussed which of them had the most heroic quirk. Many of them agreed that Todoroki and Bakugo had the flashiest quirks.
But Tsuyu Asui then said that since Bakugo is always angry, he would never be that popular. This comment sent the blonde teen into a fury. Tsuyu Asui ignored Bakugo's ravings and asked Midoriya a question. "Your power is a lot like All Might's. What's up with that, Midoriya?" This panicked the green-haired boy, but thankfully, Kirishima broke in and added that All Might did not hurt himself. This took the pressure off Midoriya. The conversation ended as the bus came to a stop. The class exited the bus. Their eyes beheld a giant dome. The class did not know what to expect to find in the place. Every location at UA had a way of blowing their minds. At the front of the facility stood the Space Hero 13. She greeted Class 1A and told them that the location was known as the Unforeseen Simulation Joint, or USJ. This place would help 13 and All Might train the students in rescue procedures and disasters. The teachers and students entered the USJ. The students were amazed at the many disaster scenes that dotted the building. With wonder still in their eyes, the students then noticed a circle of blackness take shape in the middle of the facility. A figure covered in hands walked out of the portal. This strange figure was then followed by dozens of even stranger figures of all shapes and sizes.
Whoa, is this part of the exercise?
All Might got a displeased look on his face. The number one hero shouted,
"Get back, students! This is not an exercise! Those are villains!"
The students were shocked both by the tone of All Might's statement and the content. They were not expecting to face off with real villains this early in their training. As the students regained their wits, a shadowy figure appeared in front of them.
"Hello there, All Might and company. We are the League of Villains. We have all come here to kill the symbol of peace."
This comment hung in the air like a sword over the group's heads.
"Now that I see this group, there are too many heroes here, so let us remove the children from the equation."
And with those words, a dark shadow fell over the students.
Aizawa tumbled through the portal in complete darkness. When he exited the portal, he was in the open air. The dark-haired boy started falling. He noticed he was in the shipwreck zone about 2 seconds before he hit the water. Aizawa quickly righted himself in the water. He went to swim for the surface, but noticed that he was surrounded by villains. The ever-rational Aizawa doubted that he could outswim the villains. Each of his enemies looked like they possessed a quirk that allowed them to move better than him underwater. As these thoughts flowed through his shaggy-haired head, he felt something grab him around the waist. The young man then heard a voice that sounded like it was speaking through a pillow.
"Hold still. I've got you, Aizawa."
Aizawa looked to his left and saw Tsuyu Asui. The frog girl had grabbed his waist and was moving through the water with little effort. It amazed Aizawa that the girl could move through the water as easily as he moved through the air, but it made rational sense that her frog quirk gave her such abilities. As Asui moved them through the water, they came upon Izuku Midoriya. The green-haired boy was in the same position Aizawa had been in. Asui rescued Midoriya just like Aizawa. The frog girl then zoomed off through the water, carrying the two boys away from the villains. Asui deposited the boys on the boat in the middle of the shipwreck stage. The two boys used this short reprieve to catch their breath. While Aizawa inhaled deeply, he noticed that the villains were converging on their location.
"Midoriya, Asui, we need to come up with a plan to defeat those villains. They're holding their distance for now, but those conditions will soon change, I fear."
"Just call me Sue, please."
The comment from the girl seemed odd to Aizawa's rational mind. Don't you two think it's weird that the villains would put Sue, into this area?
"What do you mean, Midoriya?"
"If I had to guess, it's because the villains don't know what our powers are. That war villain probably just deposited us and our classmates throughout the USJ at random. After all, their goal was to kill All Might. Our class was just in the way."
Do you really think they could kill someone like All Might?
"It seems unlikely, but if the villains went to all this trouble, then they probably think they have a way to kill him."
The frog girl's analysis was spot on. Aizawa was impressed by her rational line of thinking. No matter how shocking or horrifying it may have been, it was a reality that they would have to face. This is what heroes face every day. It was the situations like this that they were training for. We can worry about that later. First, let's take care of these villains.
Aizawa, do you have adhesive bombs on you?
Yes, I do.
The dark-haired boy pulled out 5 round objects from a pouch on his belt. They were shaped like ball bearings with a button on the top of each. These devices were secondary support items that Aizawa had designed. When the button was pressed, the bomb would go off, releasing a tough, glue-like substance. They were meant to be secondary capture weapons to use if his binding cloth was ineffective.
What are you planning for, Midoriya?
When you see your moment, use the bombs. Midoriya then used full cowling to launch himself into the air. He then positioned himself above the villains and held out his hand with his fingers held up in a flicking motion. The green-haired boy then yelled at the top of his lungs as he released a burst of air pressure by flicking his fingers. The wave of air hit the water, forcing a large area of liquid to be pushed out of the way. Aizawa had little time to admire his friend's tactic. The water rushed to fill the hole left by Midoriya's attack. This caused all the villains in the water to bunch together. Aizawa told Sue to grab him and jump. The frog girl also grabbed Midoriya as she jumped. Aizawa then threw his adhesive bombs into the clump of villains as the group passed overhead. The bombs detonated, causing the villains to become stuck to each other. Midoriya and Aizawa had created a nice villain ball for the police to apprehend. Asui brought the 3 teens to a safe distance from the battle site. As the 3 teens were about to discuss what to do next, a huge pressure wave exploded in an area close to them. That's All Might fighting. He releases big bursts of air pressure like that when he fights.
That just shows why he's the #1 hero.
I was thinking that we should help, but I think we might just get in the way.
We should still get back to the entrance. If I had to guess, All Might is fighting that hulking guy with the bird beak. The hand villain did not seem to be a power type like that, though I did sense something unhinged about him. The villain we need to worry about is the Warp Gate. He is their way in and out of the facility.
Don't you think it would be better if we went to help our classmates?
No, Aizawa's right. Most of the other villains are probably as effective as the ones we faced in the shipwreck zone. While they look imposing, they're not really that strong or well-trained. Well, I've just met the other members of Class 1A. They were strong enough to get into UA, so I believe that they can overcome these villains. We need to make sure that these villains cannot get away with committing this attack. Both Aizawa and Asui were moved by Midoriya's resolve and determination to see justice done. Aizawa noticed that Midoriya was flexing his fingers in a strange way.
Sue, could you scout ahead and make sure no villains are nearby?
That's a good idea, Aizawa.
With that comment, Sue bounced off to check the area for villains.
How bad is it?
Midoriya raised his hand and flexed his fingers. They were covered in purple and black bruises. It looks worse than it is. I don't think it's broken, just bruised.
How much power did you use in that airwave?
I used 30%. 20% would probably have done the job and left me with fewer marks. The problem is that the area of impact was so large and the number of villains so great that I thought that 20% might not be enough. While Aizawa understood his friend's logic, it did not take away from the fact that he would be so reckless.
Be more careful. You'll do no one any good if you rip yourself to pieces.
Aizawa glared at Midoriya when he said this to reiterate his point.
Can you still fight?
Yes. My fingers hurt, but they won't slow me down.
Okay. Just watch yourself.
As the boys finished their conversation, Asui returned and told them that the area was clear. With this information, the 3 teens took off toward the entrance of the USJ. With Aizawa in the lead, the 3 teens quietly approached the front entrance. What they saw was enough to almost make the reserved Aizawa gasp in surprise. The minor villains were all laid out. All Might was grappling with a hulking bird-faced villain. The clash was causing damage to the whole area. By the front gate, a small group of students were being protected from the warp villain by 13. All the possibilities ran through the teens' minds. They could not decide what to do at this moment.
This guy is tough.
Of course he is. He was designed to be the anti-symbol of peace. He was genetically engineered to withstand your power. As the hand villain continued to monologue about the bird-faced guy he called Nomu, All Might caught sight of Midoriya, Aizawa, and Asui out of the corner of his eyes.
That all sounds impressive, but did you really think that was going to stop me from fighting back? If my students are protected, then what happens to me is unimportant. I will never give in.
With that, All Might launched himself at the Nomu. All Might unleashed a flurry of punches at Nomu. Each one created hurricane force gusts. Each punch landed harder than the last. The bird-faced creature's immunity to shock being worn down with each blow from the #1 hero.
You may have heard these words before, but here is what they mean. Plus Ultra!
All Might hit Nomu with a punch that sent him flying. The creature went straight through the domed roof of the USJ and flew off into the distance. Aizawa and the others were amazed by this show of force.
Well, villain, is that all you have for me?
Even as All Might said that, white smoke was pouring off his body. The #1 hero could barely move. All he could do was stand there looking victorious. Even the smallest movement would cause him to revert to his weak form. The hand villain had a different reaction to All Might's show of force. He was freaking out, scratching his neck and his eyes bugging out.
Why don't things ever go the way I want them to? Kurogiri, we're leaving. This game has been a bust. We lose this level.
At that moment, a huge explosion engulfed the area around the gate. Both Bakugo and Kirishima had surprised the warp villain and captured him.
I'm sorry, Tomura Shigaraki. I have been captured.
This caused the already upset hand villain, who was named Tomura Shigaraki, to become even more agitated.
All my pawns are broken. Warp gate captured. You lied, father. He is just as strong as ever.
Aizawa then knew what his group had to do.
Asui, I need you to help our classmates keep their warp gate suppressed. Midoriya, we need to take out the hand villain.
The boys shared a look. They knew that the white smoke was a sign that All Might was out of time. He was helpless to move.
Okay, Aizawa.
The frog girl leapt off in the direction of the gate.
How do we do this, Aizawa?
We're at a good place to act now. Shigaraki's appearance and his actions. It's only rational that he has an emitter or transformation style quirk. So if I will use my quirk to block his power, and you use yours to knock him out.
Aizawa reached into his belt and handed him 2 sets of handcuffs.
Use these to restrain him.
Aizawa activated his quirk, keeping Shigaraki squarely in his sights. Shigaraki looked at All Might with absolute hatred in his eyes.
Well, if I can't escape, then I can take you out, All Might!
The villain lunged at All Might with outstretched hands. When his hands connected with All Might, nothing happened. In that moment, Midoriya used his full cowling to rush Shigaraki. The emerald hair boy unleashed a single powerful punch upon the gray-haired villain. The force of the blow knocked out Shigaraki and caused all the hands of his body to go flying. The blow also left Midoriya's whole arm badly bruised. Even with the injuries, Midoriya took the handcuffs that Aizawa gave him and cuffed Shigaraki's hands behind his back. The sudden shock of this scene and his exhausted condition made All Might lose his focus for just a moment. This lapse in concentration made the #1 hero revert to his weak form. The sight of this bone-thin man standing where the hulking pillar of heroism once stood was more of a shock to the students of 1A than the villain attack and the fact that they had stopped it. Tenya, Ida, and the UA teachers entered the scene. The group set about capturing the remaining villains and treating the wounded. The police were then called to arrest and remove the captured villains from the scene. The police were given full permission to investigate the incident by Principal Nezu. Shigaraki, Kurogiri, and the other villains were taken off to prison. The students were looked after and guarded from the media storm as best as they could. The students were also given the next 3 days off to recover. Of course, the students had only received minor bumps and scrapes. Midoriya was the only one with any major injuries, and those were only serious bruises. Recovery Girl healed him and sent him home. When the class reconvened, they had many questions about All Might. Both Midoriya and Aizawa wondered how All Might would answer these questions. The door to the 1A classroom slid open. All Might walked in his weak form, wearing a yellow suit. The class was silent for only a moment. The students then erupted with questions for the number 1 hero. Why does your body shrink? Why do you look so emaciated?
Are you stuck like this forever?
Aizawa thought that these were good questions. I know you have many questions. I guess I should start by showing you this. All Might unbuttoned his coat and pulled up his shirt. This revealed his injury. When the students saw the grotesque scars that marred the man's chest, they were horrified. I received this injury about 5 years ago. The public does not know about this fight. I did everything I could to keep this fight a secret so that the people I protect would not worry. The symbol of peace needed to endure, so that people could lead happy lives. The students were silent. None of them, except Midoriya and Aizawa, knew how to process this information. As it stands right now, I can hold muscle form for about 90 minutes. But I can only use my full power for about an hour. The fight with Nomu and the other recent events have taken too much out of me. But it was thanks to your efforts that the strain I was under was diminished. I was extremely impressed by your efforts. None of you were perfect by any means, but what this incident showed is that each of you has the heart of a true hero. Many pros would have turned tail or panicked in a situation like that. But all of you came together and faced the problem head-on. I am so proud to be your homeroom teacher. All the students were touched by this. The more emotional students, like Midoriya, Uraraka, and Ashido, were tearing up. Even Aizawa had to use all his fortitude not to tear up. So from this day forward, I will be cutting back on my hero work. This has 2 purposes. First, it will allow me to conserve what little time I have left as the symbol of peace. Hopefully, this will give you young heroes like yourselves a chance to rise and support the ideal of heroism that I helped to create. Second, it will allow me to focus my efforts on molding you into proper heroes. The class burst out in applause and cries of support for the number 1 hero's plan. Make no mistake, boys and girls, your training will be even more rigorous than before. Show me that you want to be the best. Show me that you can surpass me. With all of that said, you have a new fight ahead of you. The UA Sports Festival is coming. Meanwhile, a police transport train was moving both Kurogiri and Shigaraki to Tartarus prison. Shigaraki sat in the transport surrounded by guards. His hands and feet were bound with special cuffs to keep him from using his disintegration quirk. His body was also held tight by a type of straitjacket. Shigaraki sat there foaming with hatred and rage. The villain then started to cough. He then expelled a black, liquid-like substance from his mouth. The liquid enveloped him, and he vanished from the transport. One word flowed through Shigaraki's mind as his body vanished. That word was master. Shigaraki appeared in a warehouse as the dark liquid dissipated. Shigaraki knew this was the hideout of his master, the symbol of evil, all for one. A deep, raspy voice echoed from the shadows.
So you failed to kill All Might, Tomura Shigaraki, and you managed to get yourself and your allies captured by the authorities. How sad and disappointing.
The voice of All for One echoed throughout the large warehouse. It seemed to come from everywhere.
But do not get discouraged, Tomura. This is just the first level of your game. Try and fail as many times as you need. After all, this is all for you.
As All for One's words hung in the air, another patch of dark liquid filled the air next to Shigaraki. It was Kurogiri. It seemed that the master had plans for the warp villain.
Kurogiri, take us home. I have a lot to think about.
Yes, Tomura Shigaraki.
And with that simple exchange, Kurogiri activated a warp gate and the 2 villains disappeared. A few days later, Principal Nezu and All Might have a meeting with Detective Tsukauchi.
All Might and Nezu, sirs. I wanted to let you know that I have finished interviewing the students and staff about the USJ incident.
That is good to hear. Now the students can focus on their preparations for the sports festival.
About that, sir, do you think it wise to hold such a large event after the attack? And the fact that both Shigaraki and Kurogiri escaped custody. Isn't it likely that they or someone else could attack the sports festival?
Your concerns are valid, Detective, but the sports festival is an event that the whole country looks forward to. The risk of canceling it is greater than holding it. The attack on the USJ has left people wondering if the school is safe for our students. Canceling the festival now could reinforce that fear and undermine superhuman society.
Nezu is right, Tsukauchi. The staff all feel that it is important to show strength after an attack, but we are not blind to the danger.
In accordance, security will be increased and pro-heroes will be enlisted for extra support. With that statement from the principal, the meeting ended. Since dedicating himself more fully to being the homeroom teacher of Class 1A, All Might had been putting his students through very harsh training. Man, if All Might trained like this every day, no wonder he became number 1.
Right! I've never been this beat in my life!
Hey guys, how's everything going? Hey Midoriya, I haven't seen Aizawa for the past few days in training. What's up with that? He told me that All Might called in a special trainer to help him develop his quirk. Mina Ashido heard this and perked up from her slumped position on the ground. A nosy busybody like her could not resist a juicy piece of gossip, no matter how tired she was.
Really? Who is it? Someone famous?
The pink-haired girl asked these questions with a squeal.
Yeah, tell us who it is!
Midoriya was surprised by both Ashido's and Toru Hagakure's interest in the subject. I wish I could tell you. All Aizawa told me was that the trainer forbade him from telling anyone, even me, who he is. Even All Might wouldn't tell me.
Oh no, that's no fun! I really want to know!
If you have enough energy left to gossip, Ashido, then you can train harder.
Aizawa glared at the pink-haired girl with a cold stare.
What an icy stare! Where did you come from, Aizawa? You have a lot of nerve sneaking up on people like some pervy ninja.
Ninjas were effective because they were sneaky, so I take that as a compliment. After all, do you think that the villains will walk up and announce themselves before attacking you, Ashido? As heroes, we must be ready for the unexpected.
The pink-haired girl sat stewing from Aizawa's comments. Hey, Aizawa, is it true that you can't tell anybody who the trainer is that All Might got for you?
It is. I don't really know the reason for it, but I'll respect his wishes.
At that comment, the other students let the matter be.
Hey, Midoriya, can I speak to you for a moment?
Sure. The green-haired boy followed Aizawa outside, away from the prying ears of certain female classmates.
I wanted to ask how everything is going with your training. Are you getting a better handle on One for All?
Yeah, All Might has been pushing me hard, but I would rather show you the results of my training at the festival.
That does seem like the most rational choice. Actions show more than words ever could. Very well. I'll wait until the festival to show you my improvements, too.
Aizawa and Midoriya looked directly into each other's eyes as a silent pledge passed between them.
So, I haven't been around lately. How are our classmates doing?
At that question, Midoriya went into a legendary ramble. He covered everything going on with the rest of the class. He explained how All Might customized the training of each member of Class 1A to strengthen their bodies and to improve their quirk usage. The green teen also explained that some class members were having a hard time adjusting to the strict standards that All Might imposed. Aizawa knew that most people would not be able to follow Midoriya in one of these rants. The speed at which the teen talked and the amount of information he could articulate was scary, to say the least. But Aizawa had been exposed to enough of Midoriya's tirades that he could keep up.
That sounds promising. It's good that our class is progressing so quickly. We'll need all the training we can get to hold our own against the members of Class 1B and the other students taking aim at us.
The boys remembered the event from a couple of days before. A crowd had gathered outside of the 1A classroom. They had gathered there to check out the class that survived and foiled a villain attack. The event had ended with several members of the crowd making declarations of war, and Bakugo managing to tick off an already angry group. While several members of Class 1A were angry at Bakugo for making the class a target, Aizawa was not. To his rational mind, Bakugo had just verbalized what was already apparent. Class 1A had been singled out by the rest of the school as something special. That meant that the other students would be aiming to climb to the top by upending Class 1A's standing. Aizawa knew that this just meant that he and his class would have to work even harder. Aizawa's mind came out of that flashback to the present. The shaggy-haired teen turned to his friend with a quizzical look in his dark eyes.
I noticed that you mentioned Uraraka first during your rambling.
The mention of the pink-cheeked girl made Midoriya's face turn a bright scarlet and sweat start to run down his forehead. Aizawa thought again just how irrational these two were. He also wondered how two individuals that were so transparent with their emotions could be so criminally unaware of how the other felt. But then again, the two had not known each other that long either. Still, the irrationality of it still bothered Aizawa. Well, she's just my friend, you know, and I want her to succeed in her goals because of her situation. Aizawa recalled the conversation with the brunette. Shortly after hearing about the sports festival, the usually laid-back Uraraka had taken on an aura of determination that was a little scary. This display led Midoriya to ask Uraraka why she wanted to be a hero. The answer surprised both Midoriya and Aizawa. She wanted to be a hero to get rich. The brunette went on to explain that her family had always struggled with money. Her goal was to become a famous hero so her parents could live an easy life. On the surface, this goal seemed very unheroic, even though Aizawa knew that many individuals became heroes for that very reason. But the reason for this was very heroic. Wanting to help and support others is one of the core tenets of heroism, as far as Aizawa was concerned. These thoughts of Uraraka made Aizawa think of both Midoriya and Bakugo. While the three teens were very different in their motivations, the three did share the fact that they were very transparent about their goals to become the best heroes that they could. Midoriya wanted to keep people safe, Bakugo wanted to beat villains, Uraraka wanted to help people. But Aizawa knew that his classmates' goals were very idealistic. He knew firsthand that the world could be an unfair and irrational place. While these goals and drives were fine for a school setting, they would most likely be shattered by the world before long. With the way things were going for his class, the dark-haired boy figured that it would be sooner than later. These thoughts recalled one name in Aizawa's head. The word rang clear like a bell. That name was Oboro. Aizawa quickly buried that thought in the back of his mind. The teen knew that that train led nowhere good. All Might pushed his students hard in their training in the weeks leading up to the festival. Finally, the day arrived. Class 1A had changed into their gym uniforms and gathered in the waiting room.
Aw, man, I was hoping I could wear my costume. It's a real bummer having to wear my gym uniform.
They probably did it this way so the other course would have more level playing field. That's what makes the most rational sense. So, stop whining, Ashido.
Man, do you always have to be so serious? You are such a buzzkill, Aizawa.
This comedic exchange continued with some of the other students coming to either Ashido or Aizawa's aid. The exchange stopped when Todoroki got up from his chair and walked toward Midoriya.
Midoriya, I think that it is fair to say that at this point in our training, that I am stronger than you. But you have been getting more attention because your quirk is like All Might's. I plan to use this competition to show my strength.
The bicolored teen turned to head for the door when Midoriya spoke.
Todoroki, of course you're better than me. I have so much left to learn, but I plan to win this festival. That way, I can show all of those who believed in me how much I've grown. So right back at you. I will bring everything I have to win.
The declaration of war between the two boys energized their classmates. They all had worked very hard since starting UA. They too wanted to show how much they had improved. This festival was the best time to do that. All the first-year students entered the arena to thunderous applause. They all lined up on the field. It was then that they saw who their referee for the year would be. The R-rated hero, Midnight. Midnight announced the order of events with an enthusiastic tone and explicit manner of speech that caused many of the students to cringe. Aizawa was one of these individuals. He could tell that many of his classmates had the same feeling. On top of that, her suggestive costume was not helping the situation.
All right now, we have the first-year pledge. The student that will deliver it is Izuku Midoriya.
Momo Yaoyorozu was in line behind Aizawa. The dark-haired teen turned his head back to ask the tall girl a question.
Yaoyorozu, why is Midoriya giving the introduction alone? I was sure they would have both him and Bakugo giving it, since they both tied for first place on the hero exam entrance test.
The dark-haired girl had a pensive look on her face. Well, you see, Aizawa, the principal in All Might came to me and Ida since we are the class representatives. He asked us to choose who would deliver the speech since both Midoriya and Bakugo had tied for first place. Me and Ida decided that it would be best if Midoriya did it. More than likely, Bakugo would have said something that would have enraged everyone. Aizawa could not deny the girl's logic. Bakugo had a natural gift of ticking people off. The decision was the most rational one. Midoriya stood on the stage in a state of petrification. Eijiro Kirishima responded to the scene.
Hey, I didn't know Midoriya had a quirk like mine. He doesn't. Public speaking isn't one of Midoriya's strengths.
The green teen cleared his throat and began his impromptu speech. I just wanted to say that we have all come to UA to become heroes. We have trained hard to get to this point. While we still have a way to go, we all came here to show how much we have grown over the past months. Each of us has taken a different path, guided by the excellent UA staff. Midoriya then turned to the assembled students. With that in mind, let's show everyone here, and all those watching at home, what it means to be a UA student. Let's all go beyond. Plus Ultra! The crowd and gathered students were stunned, but a moment later, everyone burst into riotous cheering. Meanwhile, Inko Midoriya was sitting in her apartment watching the festival on television. After hearing her son's words, she burst into a river of tears.
My baby! You're so grown up, but please, son, try not to get hurt.
Aizawa was impressed. Midoriya had managed to fire up the audience and stoke the competitive spirit of his fellow students. Aizawa could see that the other students around him were now more ready than ever to start the competition. Midoriya stepped down from the stage and Midnight resumed. Such moving words and youthful passion, emotions that only someone in the springtime of their youth could convey. All that unbridled desire really turns me on. Let's get started! Midnight snapped the whip in her hand. She used it to point to the big screen in the stadium. The screen showed a revolving icon that had many events listed. The icon landed on the obstacle course event. The first event will be the obstacle course race. I hope you're as excited as I am. And with that, the sports festival had officially begun. Elsewhere, a dark room was illuminated only by the blue light of a computer screen. The light revealed the irritated face of Tomura Shigaraki. He sat watching the sports festival proceedings. As he watched the proceedings, the annoyance he felt at the sight of the kids that had foiled his plans made him start to scratch at the raw skin of his neck.
Tomura, what do you see in these children?
They're nothing but annoying kids.
Thank you all. Students were instructed by Midnight that the obstacle course would be a race around the stadium. Their path would be blocked by various traps to block their progress. The students were allowed to use their quirk however they wanted. The goal was to reach the finish line first. The students lined up at the start line. All the hero course students were itching to get started. The other courses were wondering why they were even there. Ready, set, go! Midnight cracked her whip and a loud horn sounded. The race had begun. All the students crowded into the narrow stadium entrance. The doorway became so cramped that many of the students could not lift their elbows. Well, would you look at that? They're all in a hurry, but the only place they're going is nowhere! Ah!
Open your eyes, Mike. It looks like someone has an idea of how to get moving.
Aizawa struggled to avoid being hit in the eyes by the students clogging the entrance. He noticed at the last minute that he could see his breath. Aizawa quickly used every ounce of strength and dexterity he had to jump onto the shoulders of the students surrounding him. This allowed him to miss the massive wave of ice that froze many of the other competitors' feet to the ground. Aizawa then used the frozen students' shoulders as his highway out of the stadium entrance. Aizawa thought to himself that Todoroki was one of the strongest students in 1A when it came to raw power. The problem was that Todoroki's reliance on that power made him predictable. Aizawa emerged from the doorway and was not surprised to see that Midoriya and many of his classmates had avoided the ice. It was only rational that his classmates would know what to look for, since they had trained beside Todoroki for the past few months. The dark-haired teen was also surprised to see that many Class 1B students had also avoided the ice wave. But then again, 1B was part of the hero course. Todoroki used his head start to build up a lead. The bi-colored teen was the first to come to a group of villain robots from the entrance exam. Todoroki paused from surprise for only a moment, but his face maintained an impassive expression that would have given Aizawa a run for his money. These are the robots that the others faced at the normal entrance exam. I can see why they would struggle with these. I just wish for this event that UA had given us something more challenging. After all, my father is watching.
A giant zero-pointer reached down its massive hand to halt Todoroki's progress. The bicolored teen then released another massive wave of ice. This one froze the colossal robot in place. Todoroki then ran ahead unhampered.
Wow! That kid just froze all of our Robo-Infernos! That is, after freezing the rest of the students out of a head start. Is there anything that this kid can't do?
If you look closer, Mike, you will see that Todoroki froze that zero-pointer in an unbalanced state. The other students are about to have an even more difficult time.
Todoroki's trap caught many of the students off guard. When the dust from the collapsing robot cleared, Aizawa saw that most of his classmates had gotten clear of the incident. The dark-haired teen did overhear some of the other students say that a redhead and a gray-haired guy got caught in the collapse. Before he could worry about who it was, the pail of scrap metal began to crack and move.
I'm alive! Anybody but me would have been killed!
I knew it! Class A is full of jerks. Wow, nice save, dude! Anyone but me would have been killed. Man, our quirks are the same! How am I supposed to stand out now? Aizawa was happy to see that the ridiculous redhead was okay. The teen then turned back to the race. He used his capture scarf to get over the zero-pointers by climbing over their slow-moving bodies. He saw out of the corner of his eye that Bakugo was using his explosions to propel himself through the air and over the robots. All the while, the atomic blonde was yelling that he was going to get Todoroki. Midoriya, too, had used the speed granted by One For All to bash and zip through the robots. Both Midoriya and Bakugo passed the robots with little problem. The two teens then went after their freeze-happy classmate at full speed. And will you look at that, Snipe? Our leader has come to the next obstacle, the fall. Everybody watch your step. Todoroki used his ice to slide effortlessly across the wires that connected the different cliffs together.
Damn it, icy hot!
Todoroki looked over his shoulder to see that Bakugo was flying toward his position. He could also see that Midoriya was right behind the blonde and coming up fast. The icy teen just turned and continued on his way. Aizawa approached the fall to see that many other students had beat him there. Most were standing around, wondering how to get across. Aizawa saw the wires, and his rational mind came up with a plan instantly.
High wires? No problem.
Aizawa ran out onto the high wires and crossed them with little difficulty. For Aizawa, such an act was no more difficult than crossing the street. Aizawa then took off to catch up with the three leaders. He was not going to let Midoriya get all the attention. This act caused some of his more hesitant classmates to get the let out and move on. All of the students found a way to cross. Most attempts were a bit shaky. A pink-haired girl crossed using several support items that she called her babies, while Ida's crossing looked downright foolish. Todoroki approached the next obstacle. The elemental teen saw a large sign that said, "Beware of mines." The ground was covered in spots of disturbed earth. And it looks like Todoroki has reached the minefield. Don't worry, folks, these mines are not deadly. They just pack enough punch to make you wet your pants.
Me and the people at home did not need that mental image, Mike.
As Todoroki slowly made his way across the minefield, he heard a loud explosion, followed by a voice that was full of rage and indignation. Bakugo came flying into the minefield. "Icy hot! Your declaration of war was to the wrong person!" With those few words, Bakugo started to attack Todoroki. As explosion went against ice, Midoriya arrived at the field. Midoriya grabbed a nearby rock and threw it at a nearby mine. About a second between impact and detonation. Midoriya then went into a muttering session with this information. He came to only one workable solution. "I've been using 10% output until this point. I'm going to have to up my output to 12% to outrun the mines." Midoriya collected his thoughts and charged up his full cowling to 12%. He took off running across the minefield. By the time the mine went off, he was already gone. He left a trail of pink explosions as he advanced. The other students were amazed and confused at how he was able to do such a thing. Meanwhile, both Todoroki and Bakugo were in the middle of a great fight.
Bakugo tried to knock out Todoroki with his explosions. The blonde would only succeed in having his blows deflected and his limbs covered in ice. By the time the two combatants saw Midoriya coming, he flew right past them. Both Todoroki and Bakugo broke off from their fight and chased after Midoriya. As Midoriya cleared the minefield, he looked back to see that both Todoroki and Bakugo were catching up fast. Midoriya was impressed that these two could keep up with him. The three boys entered the final 100 feet. Midoriya knew that his only hope of coming in first would be to go to 13% output. While it was not much of an increase, he knew that it would be enough to get him over the finish line. After all, he didn't want to reveal everything he could do this early in the competition. The power of One for All surged through his body. The green-haired boy burst forward to the surprise of his classmates. Midoriya came to a halt when he crossed the finish line. The crowd roared in applause. "Well, folks, it looks like we have the winner of the first event. It is Izuku Midoriya!" "I did it, All Might! I got first place!" All Might sat watching in his normal form.
Young Midoriya, at heart you want to save people. I thought that this competition would be a problem for you.
The blonde hero clapped his hands together.
Turns out I was worried for nothing. You have quite the fighting spirit after all.
The other competitors entered the stadium in a quick succession. Todoroki was second, Bakugo came in third. The blonde boy's eyes glowed with frustration at the fact that he had been beaten by both Todoroki and Midoriya. Aizawa managed to come in a respectable 6th place. Uraraka was breathing heavily when she came into the stadium. The brunette ran over to Midoriya. "Deku, that was amazing! I didn't know you were that fast!" Midoriya got a mild blush on his cheeks at the girl's praise. "Well, All Might put me through a lot of tough training in the past weeks." Aizawa would have commented on this to Midoriya, but Midnight broke in and told the winners about the next event. "All right, finishers, there's no rest for a true hero. The selection of the second event is upon you." The R-rated hero snapped her whip and a big screen came up with the next event. All the students would be involved in a cavalry battle. Many of the students thought it was strange that they would be playing a schoolyard game in a competition like this. Midnight then broke in to explain that the students would break up into groups of 3 or 4. Each team would receive a headband with a total point value of the team. 10 points would be awarded to everyone by how they finished in the race. Points would be given to last place, and the points would increase in 10-point increments. However, the first place spot would be worth 10 million points. Every student turned toward Midoriya. Their eyes had a hungry look in them. They all knew the easiest way to win the event was to steal Midoriya's points. Midoriya knew that he would have to put together a strong team to win the event. But his hopes of doing this were quickly dashed as both Ida and Aizawa refused to join his team. They both gave the reason that Midoriya had proven that he was a strong competitor in the last event. The two boys were not going to let Midoriya be the only standout at the festival. Midoriya had almost given up on forming a team when a hand touched his shoulder. "Hey Deku, let's team up." Midoriya let loose a river of tears. "Uraraka, are you sure you want to team up with me and my 10 million stupid points?" "Of course, I think it's important to team up with friends." The young girl beamed with joy as she smiled at the tearful Midoriya. It was not long after this that Midoriya was approached by another girl, Mei Hatsume. "I wanted to use your current fame to my advantage. Team up with me, person in first place." Midoriya was taken aback by Hatsume's brutal honesty. The green-haired teen knew that he could work with these two, but he would need a strong third member to his team. He approached his raven-headed classmate, Tokoyami. The bird boy agreed to Midoriya's offer. Midoriya then laid out his plan for his teammates. Across the field, Aizawa had also completed his team. He had recruited Mashiro Ojiro and Yuga Aoyama to his team. "Listen up, you two. This is my plan. We will go after the teams with the smaller amounts of points. This will allow us to build up our point value and get us to the final round. So we are not going after Midoriya's team. It would be completely irrational to do that. Both Todoroki and Bakugo have their sights on Midoriya. Both have quirks that have many applications in an event like this.
And Midoriya's no pushover. He's not going to just sit still and let us take his points. No, it's more rational to make sure we have enough points first before going after Midoriya.
The two other boys agreed with Aizawa's plan. They also agreed that Aizawa would be best suited to being the raider. Ojiro would be the rear horse and use his tail to defend the group. Aoyama would be the front horse and use his laser to attack. And with that, the teams were formed and the second round was underway. Midoriya had devised a defensive plan. It used Tokoyami's Dark Shadow to defend the group from all sides, Uraraka's Zero Gravity to make the group float, and Hatsume's support gear to allow them to move freely around the field. When the event started, Midoriya's team was immediately beset upon by the other teams. Thanks to Midoriya's strategy, the team was able to defend against and dodge most attempts to grab their points for the first half of the match.
We are doing really well, guys. Hatsume, your babies are amazing.
I know, right? This praise for the pink-haired girl from Midoriya made Uraraka a little jealous. But the brunette was not prepared for what Midoriya said next.
Uraraka, great job on making us float. We couldn't do this without you.
Uraraka did her best to suppress a full-face blush, but her cheeks did turn red from the effort.
Thank you, Deku. Tokoyami, your Dark Shadow is just what we need for our omnidirectional defense.
Well, you are the one who chose me for that role.
Everything was going according to plan. The team thought they had it made. Then Todoroki showed up and ruined that feeling. The bicolored teen had managed to disable half of the teams on the field using his ice and Kaminari's electricity. Todoroki then used his ice to create a wall to keep out the other competitors. Todoroki and his team now took direct aim at Midoriya's team. Both teams traded blows with neither gaining any advantage. Then Ida came up with an idea.
Everyone, I am about to do something that will make me useless to you.
What are you planning, Ida?
It does not matter. Just make sure you get that headband.
Ida's engines heated up and blue flames came flying out. He burst forward at high speed, dragging his teammates along for the ride.
Recipro burst!
As Todoroki approached Midoriya, he managed to grab the green-haired boy's headband. Just as he was moving away, Midoriya snapped his hand around the headband and yanked it back from Todoroki.
How did he react so quickly?
Ida's engine stalled. Todoroki was in shock at what had just occurred. For just one moment, Todoroki lost control and unleashed a burst of fire from his left hand. Midoriya saw this and prepared to counter with a new move.
I did not want to use this yet, but it's the only way to defend.
Midoriya told his teammates to brace themselves. The teen raised his right hand into the air and placed his fingers into a flicking position. The force of One for All flowed into his fingers, and he released a powerful burst of air pressure. The air bullet sliced the fire in half, deflecting the fire to either side of Midoriya's team. Just as Todoroki's team was again gripped by awe, Bakugo burst through the ice wall.
Deku, icy hot. Who has the points?
The bell sounded throughout the stadium.
And that is it, folks. The end of the second event is here!
Bakugo went into a tantrum at not having finished in first place. Again. Good job, everyone! The winner of this event is Team Midoriya! Midnight went on to say that Team Bakugo finished second, Team Todoroki finished third, and Team Aizawa got fourth place. Since an odd number of people finished in the first four places, one member from the fifth place team, Team Kendo, would advance as well. It would be unfair for one of us to advance since we were frozen in place for half of the time. You should choose from Team Tetsu. They were active on the field for the whole match. Tetsu was moved to tears by this statement from his classmate. Kendo remarked that it was only fair, and her teammates agreed. After a short discussion, the members of Team Tetsu agreed that Tetsu should be the one to advance. Such a show of sportsmanship! But is this allowed?
Well, Midnight is the referee. Let's see what she says.
The R-rated hero got an annoyed look on her face. This talk is naive, children. It totally turns me on. Tetsu advances to the final round. Again, the students were embarrassed by the suggestive nature of Midnight's language. Aizawa walked over to Midoriya.
I'm glad to see that we both made it into the final round, Midoriya.
Were you worried about me, Aizawa?
I was more focused on getting into the next round, but considering the caliber of the guys that had you in their sights, a little worry was only rational.
This short exchange ended when Midnight announced that the final event would be single combat. The R-rated hero then snapped her whip, and the big screen displayed the matchups. The only match differences from the original is Midoriya versus Todoroki, Sero versus Aizawa, and Ojiro versus Kaminari. Aizawa looked over at his friend and saw the look of worry he was suppressing. Yet another example of how Midoriya could never hide his feelings. Meanwhile, a shadowy figure stood on top of a building gazing over a city. The man unsheathed the sword on his back and thrust it behind him. The tip of the blade met a vaporous mass of shadows.
Who are you? My name is Kurogiri, and you are the famous hero killer Stain. I would like to have a discussion.
Izuku Midoriya left the field to go to the locker rooms. He told Aizawa that he needed to strategize about his match with Todoroki. Aizawa knew there was something wrong with his friend. Aizawa figured it was that Midoriya did not think that he could win in a fight against Todoroki. It was a rational concern. Todoroki was one of the most powerful members of the class. His quirk alone would make him a serious threat. But the way the bicolored teen used his powers was over the top. This was enough to make anyone concerned. As Aizawa watched his friend leave the field, he knew that something else was at play. He could follow the green-haired teen, but Aizawa did not think this was the most rational approach. Midoriya would not need a logical dissection of the facts. Midoriya needed his spirits raised. Aizawa knew that there was only one person for the job. The dark-haired teen walked over to Uraraka and placed his hand on her shoulder. The brunette turned around. "What is it, Aizawa?"
Uraraka, I need you to go and check on Midoriya for me. You will find him in the locker rooms.
The girl's usually pink cheeks turned bright red at this suggestion. "Why me? I mean, wouldn't it be better if you did that? I mean, we barely know each other, and you've known him for years." The brunette waved her arms in the most bizarre gestures as she talked, and her forehead was working up quite a sweat, too. Aizawa wanted to slap his forehead in frustration. How could Midoriya and Uraraka be so blind to their feelings for each other?
The amount of time you and Midoriya have known each other is irrelevant. I know you noticed how Midoriya left the field. I'm not sure just what is going on with him, but he needs encouragement. You are better suited to that task than me.
Aizawa turned to walk away, but gave a last firm look at Uraraka. The girl knew that Aizawa meant business. Midnight announced that there would be a short intermission before the finals started. There would be games for all of the students to participate in. The students could compete, or they could rest for the next rounds. Uraraka left the field and went to find Midoriya. As the brunette walked toward the locker rooms, she found Midoriya and Todoroki talking in the hallway. The two boys did not see her, but she could hear them. Todoroki was asking Midoriya if he was All Might's secret love child. Hearing this question from Todoroki almost made the brunette gasp with shock. Fortunately, she managed to contain her emotions. Uraraka continued to listen to the conversation. The revelations about Todoroki's awful childhood and harsh family life at the hands of his father, the flame hero Endeavor, almost made Uraraka tear up. The conversation between the boys ended when Todoroki said that Midoriya's connection to All Might meant that it was even more important that he win the first match. The frosty boy would show his father that he can win using just his mother's quirk. Midoriya and Todoroki went their separate ways. As Midoriya turned to go to the locker room, he almost ran into Uraraka. "Uraraka, what are you doing here?" The brunette did not know what to say. It was hard to answer after hearing Todoroki's backstory. "Aizawa asked me to check on you," the girl finally answered. "And I was concerned by the way that you left the field." Midoriya did not know how to process these words. Uraraka was worried about him? Aizawa, he understood, but seeing a girl other than his mother being concerned about him was such an alien concept that he could not process it. Finally, Midoriya responded, "Thank you, Uraraka. You don't have to worry about me. Deku, I know you're worried about your match with Todoroki. He is an incredible student, and he will be a great hero one day.
But don't forget that you're amazing too. If there's anyone who can overcome long odds, it's you, Deku. Midoriya smiled at Uraraka's words. He was panicking and sad after hearing Todoroki's story. But after hearing those 4 short sentences from Uraraka, he felt like he could accomplish anything. He wondered to himself if Uraraka, like Todoroki, had a second quirk that boosted confidence. You're right, Uraraka. If I'm going to be a hero that makes people smile, then I must keep going. I will make it to the top. Seeing the change in his demeanor put a smile on the brunette's face. With his mood boosted, Midoriya and Uraraka walked back toward the field to rejoin their classmates. On the way to the field, the 2 teens crossed paths with the flame hero Endeavor. The burning gaze in the hero's eyes was almost as overbearing as the flames coming off of his body.
Oh, there you are. I was looking for you.
The burning man pointed at Midoriya. I wanted to tell you that your showing in this festival has been impressive. The speed and strength you showed in the first 2 rounds reminds me of All Might. Midoriya freaked out for a moment. The teen wondered if Endeavor had figured out about One for All. Uraraka thought it was strange that the number 2 hero would seek out Midoriya. Your match against my son will be a good proving ground for him. Give it your best. I have plans for that boy. The flaming man said those words with a sinister air that made Midoriya's skin crawl. Endeavor, you're wrong. I am not All Might, and your son is not you. The flame hero was puzzled by this statement. Midoriya turned to return to the field without another word. Uraraka followed Midoriya. The girl could not help thinking how cool Midoriya looked, standing up to an imposing character like Endeavor. Uraraka then blushed slightly at the fact that she was having such thoughts about Midoriya. The intermission ended, and it was time for the matches to begin.
This is what we've all been waiting for! The first match will see Izuku Midoriya from Class 1A against Todoroki from Class 1A. It is Ice versus Brute Force. Let's get this party started!
As Present Mike made his over-the-top introduction, Midoriya and Todoroki entered the arena to bursts of fire and the screams of the crowd. As the 2 boys stared each other down, Midnight explained that the battle would end when a competitor was knocked out of bounds, gave up, was rendered immobile, or was judged to be incapable of continuing by her. Cementos would be watching the battles also and would intervene if the fight got out of hand. With those final instructions, Midnight snapped her whip and told the boys to begin. Todoroki unleashed a power blast of ice to start the match. Midoriya knew he could not let the ice touch him. He knew that there is only one move he could use. He raised his hand and flicked his fingers toward the oncoming ice. A powerful burst of air contacted the ice and broke it into pieces.
You used that ability in the second round. What is that?
I call it Air Force. All Might had taught Midoriya the secret to most of his super moves. The force of One for All was so great that Midoriya could weaponize air pressure. The blonde hero had revealed this fact to Midoriya after the green-haired boy had mastered using One for All at 15%. Midoriya had mastered using 20% of One for All. But to counter Todoroki's ice blasts, he had to push his output to his upper limit of 35%. But the green-haired boy knew that the mental focus and physical endurance needed to pull off this would quickly drain his stamina. Midoriya knew that at his current level, he would only be able to pull off a max power Air Force 5 more times. He needed to close the distance between himself and Todoroki. Midoriya used full cowling to increase his speed. He ran forward, dodging Todoroki's ice blasts. But every time Midoriya would get close, the ice user would slide away on an ice sheet. The match turned into a game of cat and mouse. As the match went on, Midoriya noticed that Todoroki's attacks got slower and less powerful. He could also see that the bicolored teen's body had a noticeable layer of frost on it.
That is interesting.
What is it, Aizawa?
It would seem that our unbeatable ice wielder does have a weakness.
What do you mean?
Red Eye means that Icy Hot's moves are slower and less powerful than they were at the beginning of the match.
Aizawa did not like Bakugo's nickname for him, but his statement was true.
Look at Todoroki's right side.
It's covered in frost. Is that what you mean?
Yes. As he creates his ice, it must cool off his body. He could offset this by using his left side, but has not done that yet. If Todoroki continues this way, then he will pass out from the cold.
It already looks like he's shivering from here.
Meanwhile, on the field, Midoriya had made a similar deduction. This led him to confront Todoroki about why he was not using his left side. Midoriya's eyes lit up with a fury that he had never had. "Quit screwing around, Todoroki! You've not even laid a scratch on me, Todoroki! Everyone here is giving their all to win! If you're not willing to go all out, then why are you even here?"
I told you before, Midoriya. I'll not give my father the satisfaction of seeing me use my fire. I will win using only my mother's quirk.
It's your quirk, not his!
Those 6 words hit Todoroki like a wrecking ball. The teen's left side burst into flame. The frost that accumulated on his body evaporated from the heat. You're crazy, you know that? Helping your opponent in the middle of a match? You want my fire? Then here it comes. Todoroki released giant pillars of ice towards Midoriya. The green-haired boy used his full cowling at 30%, the highest percentage he could use safely, to deliver powerful punches that broke the ice pillars. These blows sent freezing air surging out into the stadium. Todoroki then charged up the fire on his left side until his left hand glowed with a burning light. Midoriya saw this and knew that Todoroki was going all out like he asked. Midoriya knew that he could not hold back either, so the green-haired boy threw caution to the wind. He forced the full power of One For All into his right arm. Green lightning sparked off his body in response to this power boost. Both teens got ready for their final strikes in this epic contest. Midnight, we need to stop this. These two are going all out. They could seriously hurt themselves. Cementoss used his quirk to put up several barriers of cement to separate the two students. Unfortunately, the force of the two boys caused these barriers to shatter on impact. A huge explosion resulted, sending a huge wave of pressure ripping through the stands of the stadium. A huge blanket of dust and fog covered the stadium. What happened? The air was superheated after being supercooled. This caused the air to rapidly expand. The stadium was completely silent. Everyone wanted to know one thing: who had won? The fog finally cleared. The scene showed Midoriya standing in the middle of the ring with his arm outstretched. This arm was covered in bruises up to his shoulder. In front of him were 3 layers of ice walls. Each ice wall had a huge hole in the middle. Todoroki was still standing also, but his left foot had crossed the ring's boundary line. What a show! But it looks like Shoto Todoroki is out of bounds. The winner of the first match is Izuku Midoriya! The crowd broke into a riot of cheering. Having a powerful quirk does not mean that you will be a great hero, but these two are amazing. Both boys were taken to Recovery Girl for first aid. That was annoying, Midoriya. You expect me to follow a match like that? I'm going to give you a piece of my mind when this is over. As it turned out, Todoroki's injuries were very minor. Recovery Girl healed him and allowed him to leave. While Midoriya's injuries looked worse, it turned out they were just superficial wounds. The elderly woman marveled at how much Midoriya's body had changed since he enrolled at UA. A group of 1A students decided to check on Midoriya. This group included Ida, Uraraka, and Asui. When this group asked Aizawa to come with them, he refused. The dark-haired boy said that Midoriya would be fine and he needed to focus on his match. But he did tell them to tell Midoriya not to be so reckless. The 3 friends were told by Recovery Girl that Midoriya would be fine, but he needed to rest. The old lady then kindly told the 3 to go away. The 3 friends then told Midoriya to feel better. As they left the room, All Might, in his skinny form, entered the room in a blue suit. "Oh, All Might, sir, have you come to see Deku?" I told you, young Uraraka, when I'm in this form, call me Mr. Yagi. "Oh, yes, sir. I'm sorry." But to answer your first question, yes, I came in to check on him. If you'll excuse me. All Might entered the room to talk to Midoriya. The blonde hero closed the door behind him. You did well, young Midoriya. I'm proud of you. But I must ask, why did you go out of your way to help Todoroki? You could have won the match quicker if you refrained from getting the boy to use his fire. I know I could have, but it wouldn't have been right. Looking at Todoroki, I could only see someone in need of help. I know I should have focused on the match, but I couldn't help it. I can't turn my back on someone who needs help. It is true that you took a big risk in helping young Todoroki, Never forget, young Midoriya, that interfering where you don't have to is the essence of being a hero.
All Might left the room to let Midoriya rest up for his next match. As Midoriya closed his eyes to rest, he heard a voice in the back of his mind.
It is almost time.
Back in the arena, the matches continued. It seemed to many that the final round was just a showcase for Class 1A. Aizawa managed to defeat Sero in record time. Sero looked quite ridiculous, being hogtied in Aizawa's capture scarf. Aizawa was able to use this item in the festival events because he had filled out the proper paperwork. Ida won his match after Mei Hatsumi turned him into a running advertisement for her support items. The blue-haired boy could not believe that he had been tricked like that. Ojiro defeated Kaminari after the latter shorted his brain out. The goofy expression on Kaminari's face when he lost left Jiro rolling on the floor in laughter. Ashido finished Aoyama with a little fanfare. Even Class 1A was surprised that Ashido won by using brute strength and not by using her quirk. Although she did manage to leave Aoyama pantsless. Tokoyami finished the battle with Yayorozu before the girl could even attack once. This left the dark-haired girl feeling down. She began to wonder if she was just a fake hero. Before Yayorozu could get too deep into despair, Aizawa set the girl straight. Aizawa explained that Yayorozu lost because she thought too much. If Yayorozu wanted to get better as a hero, she needed to work on making quick decisions. Villains were not going to give her time to make an extensive plan to defeat them. Yayorozu perked up at the words of her classmate. She thanked him for his helpful advice. Kirishima's match was decided by an arm wrestling match that the spiky redhead won. Finally, Bakugo defeated Uraraka. The round-faced girl gave it her all, but she could not match Bakugo's raw power. A 15-minute break was called by the referees to repair the ring for the next rounds of battles. Aizawa decided that he would go to the locker room to prepare himself mentally for his next match. It had been a while since Aizawa and Midoriya had faced off. Midoriya had changed a lot, but so had Aizawa. He planned to show his green-haired friend just how much in this battle. As Aizawa made his way to the locker room, he was met by a tall man in a white business suit.
Sir, I did not know you would be here.
It may be proper manners to announce your arrival, but I did not want my presence to disrupt the festival's final battles. Unlike Endeavor, some pro heroes know how to keep their cool.
You have a point, sir, but I have a feeling that is not the only reason you are here.
That is true. What do you think is my second reason for being here, Aizawa?
Aizawa had been introduced to Sir Night-Eye by All Might. The #1 hero figured that Night-Eye would be a better trainer for Aizawa than anyone at UA. Aizawa did not disagree with All Might. Night-Eye did have a quirk that functioned, at least on a basic level, like his. The well-groomed hero had been very helpful in Aizawa's training.
You must be here to analyze Izuku Midoriya. After all, you are one of the few people that knows about the connection between All Might and Midoriya. You wanted to see if he was a worthy successor to All Might.
A most rational analysis, as usual, Aizawa. Yes, I am here to see the successor of One for All. I did not agree with All Might's decision at first, but I wish to see the successor with my own eyes.
So, what do you think of him so far?
I have yet to make a judgment. You are not wrong about him, Aizawa. He is a lot like All Might in some ways, but he is vastly different in other ways. Whether that is good or bad is yet to be seen.
With those final words, Sir Night-Eye walked off toward the stadium, leaving Aizawa alone. The long-haired boy continued on his way to the locker room.
Thank you. Midoriya was stretching in the locker room. At the same time, he was mentally preparing himself for his battle with Aizawa. Midoriya knew the sleepy teen's fighting style enough. This meant he knew enough to not underestimate Aizawa. Even though Midoriya had gotten stronger thanks to One for All, so had Aizawa with his erasure. The green-haired teen could not help but get excited at the impending battle with his best friend. As this thought flowed through Midoriya's mind, a knock came at the door. "Deku, are you there?" "Oh, hello, Uraraka." "I'm glad to see that you're doing okay, Deku." "Yeah, recovery girl got me patched up." Midoriya noticed a bandage on the brunette's face, and it looked like she had been crying. "Is that from your match with Kacchan?" The round-faced girl rubbed the bandage at the mention of the battle. "Yeah, I tried the best I could to win, but I just couldn't compete with Bakugo's raw power." "Is that what made you cry?" Uraraka blushed at that question. "No, well, sort of.
You see, after the match, my parents called me. I felt really sad and disappointed that I did not do better in the finals. Midoriya remembered the earlier conversation he had had with Uraraka, how her goal was to become a great hero to help her parents live an easier life. I think you did really well. Kacchan is not an easy opponent for anyone to defeat. Your meteor attack was a great tactic. You could not have known that Kacchan could release such a big blast. You saw that, Deku? Yes, I had recovered enough to see your battle. I thought it was amazing. Midoriya felt a little hesitant about saying this next part, but he went with it. You are amazing, Uraraka. Uraraka's cheeks went from pink to luminous red in an instant. The girl did not know what to say. She was not expecting to receive such praise from Midoriya. After what seemed like an eternity, Uraraka managed to regain her senses. Thank you, Deku. That is so sweet. Uraraka, I have wanted to ask you something for a while now, but now that I think about it, this may not be the best time. Midoriya then started to go into one of his major rambling sessions. Uraraka was so eager to hear what he was going to ask that she did something that was very out of character for her. Uraraka grabbed Midoriya by the shoulders and shook him out of his ramble. Deku, please just ask me your question. Uraraka smiled at Midoriya when she said this. Okay, I wanted to know if I could call you sometimes, to talk about things. Uraraka could feel just how tense Midoriya was. The green-haired boy's body was as stiff as a board. Then Uraraka turned red again when she realized that she was still touching Midoriya. The pink-cheeked girl then released her grip on Midoriya's shoulders. Uraraka managed to reply through her embarrassment. I would like that, Deku, but don't you have Aizawa for that kind of thing? Well, that is true, but you have a more supportive nature than Aizawa does, and it is just really nice to talk to you. Okay, I get it. I feel the same way. The round-faced girl smiled, but then had a realization. Oh, I interrupted your preparations for your next match. I'm so sorry, Deku. Midoriya smiled at the girl. It is okay, Uraraka. I think this was just what I needed. Thank you. You're welcome. Now go out there and win. I will be watching you. Midoriya could not help but smile at those words. While this lovely scene was going on, it was being overheard from outside the door. Aizawa had come down to the locker room to tell Midoriya not to hold back in their match. But when the dark-haired boy arrived at the room, he did not expect to hear this. Aizawa thought that Midoriya's proposal, for lack of a better word, was not as straightforward as he would have liked it. Clearly, he liked the girl and she liked him back. Then Aizawa considered that Midoriya was probably testing the waters. Girls had never been interested in Midoriya, so while this step would be very small for boys their age, for Midoriya it was a huge step indeed. While Aizawa would have liked for Midoriya to be more upfront, he thought this was a good beginning. Aizawa decided to let the two have their moment. The dark-haired boy then walked toward the arena. The two lovebirds would not know he was there, but he would keep an eye on both. All right, it is time! The ring is fixed, the competitors are healed, and the audience is ready! It is time for the second round of the finals to begin! That is right, Mike. For the match we have two members of Class 1A, Izuku Midoriya and Shota Aizawa. The friends stood in the ring opposite one another. Midoriya had a serious look on his face. Aizawa had his usual blank expression. The boys exchanged no words. Both knew what the other wanted from this match. All right, students, show us your passion. Begin. Before Midoriya could even get One for All flowing through him, Aizawa activated his quirk. The dark-haired boy's usually half-closed eyes opened wide. Aizawa's normally dark irises were crimson. Midoriya knew Aizawa would do that. If Aizawa managed to use his capture weapon on Midoriya before his time ran out, then the match would end. Midoriya decided to waste no time. The forest-haired teen ran forward, ready to combat Aizawa with only his fighting skills. Aizawa unslung his capture weapon from around his neck. The dark-haired teen whipped his binding in Midoriya's direction. Aizawa managed to wrap his binding cloth around Midoriya's wrist. Aizawa then changed direction to bind Midoriya's hands. Aizawa was surprised when Midoriya quickly changed direction to avoid this. Midoriya then used his powerful grip to yank Aizawa toward him with his binding cloth. The green-haired teen then delivered a powerful kick to Aizawa's side. Aizawa received only slight damage from this attack. The dark teen used his improved agility and speed to move out of the way at the last minute. Aizawa stood rubbing his side, his gaze locked on Midoriya. Your base speed has improved greatly. I have a hard time believing that you're powerless. Your movements have gotten better too. I am not surprised. The two then continued. Midoriya would get close, only to have Aizawa dodge out of the way. Aizawa found it hard to immobilize Midoriya. Even with all the improvements the steely-eyed teen had made, he was barely keeping up. It was obvious to Aizawa that Midoriya had also been improving his fighting style, not just one for all. As the battle carried on, Aizawa could feel that he was reaching the erasure limit. Aizawa's eyes were now painfully dry and bloodshot. The teen knew he only had maybe 2 minutes left if he was lucky. Midoriya did not give an inch. He advanced on Aizawa using kicks and punches. Aizawa managed to dodge these attacks. Midoriya was not like the other opponents. Most individuals would be rattled if you suddenly took their quirk away. Most quirk users became so dependent on their quirk that they could not function in a fight without their power. Midoriya had developed these moves when he had no quirk. Having been around Aizawa so long too had shown him that he needed to develop his own skills, not just his quirk. As this thought ran through Aizawa's mind, the teen couldn't hold it on longer, and he blinked, releasing his hold over Midoriya. Midoriya could feel his quirk awakening. The pine-haired teen knew he only had moments to act. "Sorry about this, Aizawa! Air Force!" A large burst of pressure crashed into Aizawa. The dark teen tried to hold his ground, but it was no use. Aizawa was knocked off his feet and fell to the ground, having the wind knocked out of him. Midoriya rushed forward, using full cowling to grab Aizawa and lay him outside the boundary line. Aizawa is out! Izuku Midoriya advances to the next round. Meanwhile, Class 1A was watching from the stands. Wow, Aizawa did better than I thought he would! True, most people would either freeze or be unable to fight without their quirk. Midoriya's performance probably stems from the fact that he had fought Aizawa before and knew that he would not be able to use his quirk. Well, the two of them did know each other very well. After all, Aizawa was the first one to train Deku in combat. I did know that. Mina Ashido's face went wide when hearing this. You seem to know Midoriya very well. Please tell us more. Uraraka's face went red upon hearing this. The round-faced girl then freaked out. It's not like that, Mina, I swear! The other Class 1A girls were surprised by this reaction. The boys were just confused and had no idea what was going on. Yayorozu cleared her throat. Be that as it may, I hope that Aizawa doesn't take the loss too hard. It can be hard to suffer a loss in front of so many people. I wouldn't worry about Aizawa. Knowing him, he will see this loss as a reason to improve. Mina put a serious scowl on her face. After all, that is the most rational thing to do. Several 1A students stifled laughs at Ashido's impression of Aizawa. I would be careful, Ashido. If Aizawa saw that impersonation, he would give you one of his cold, icy stares. Ashido shivered at the thought. Aizawa's glare could scare the spots off a Dalmatian. The tournament continued. Ida defeated Ojiro. Tokoyami was able to defeat Ashido easily. Finally, Bakugo won out over Kirishima with a blistering barrage of explosions. In the next round, Ida tried his best, but was unable to get the better of Midoriya's full cowling. Bakugo realized that Tokoyami had a weakness to light and got the W. Midnight stepped before the cheering crowd. This has been an exciting competition! We will take a short break before we see the final match of Izuku Midoriya versus Katsuki Bakugo. Aizawa returned to the stands after being healed by Recovery Girl. The boy seemed to be in good spirits and had no visible injuries. Hi, Aizawa. How are you doing? Hello, Uraraka. I'm fine. Has the final match begun? No, they needed to take a break to repair the damage caused by Bakugo in his match against Tokoyami. Aizawa noticed that the bird boy shivered at the reminder of his recent loss. This should be an interesting match. Aizawa knew that there were others in the audience that had the same idea. All Might sat in the UA staff box by himself, in skinny form. He was amazed that Midoriya had done so well. The #1 hero could not wait to see how the boy would fare in the final match. Afternoon, Mr. Yagi. All Might turned to see his old sidekick. Night Eye, I didn't expect to see you here. It was a last-minute decision. I thought it would be best to attend. Midoriya was preparing for the final battle against Bakugo in the locker room. Suddenly, the door to the room flew open. Bakugo was standing there with his foot out, and the door had a boot print indented on it. What are you doing here, Deku? The blonde then looked at the number on the door and gritted his teeth in annoyance. What? This is room 2? While I am here, I wanted to let you know that I expect your best in this final. Come at me like you did Icy Hot. I don't know how you got his power, but I will show everyone that I am the best. Bakugo then turned and stomped out of the room, slamming the door behind him. Midoriya felt slightly bad about not telling Bakugo about his quirk, but he had promised All Might that he would not tell anyone. The green-haired teen did wonder if Bakugo had put any of it together. The way Bakugo phrased his threat made it seem like he knew something unusual was up. Midoriya knew that despite how Bakugo acted, he was not an idiot. Midnight snapped her whip in the air. Alright everyone, this is what the UA Sports Festival for the first years has been building to. 2 students from Class 1A will go head-to-head for all the marbles. I hope everyone is excited as I am. Both Midoriya and Bakugo stood in the ring. The boys stared each other down with looks of determination that could melt steel. It was obvious to anyone watching that these boys would not hold back. Remember what I said, Deku. Give it everything. You want everything, Kacchan? Then everything is what you will get. With those words, Midoriya unleashed the power of One for All. The teen's body glowed as the green lighting sparked off him. Competitors, begin! Both boys charged towards each other. Several blows were exchanged without a single hit. Bakugo used his explosion to maneuver around Midoriya's strikes. Midoriya was using the highest output he could use at this point, which was 20%, to try and land a hit. It was not easy. Even though Midoriya was a little faster than Bakugo, the Ashen Blonde was the better combatant. Anytime the Viridian-haired team would get close to a hit, Bakugo would block it or dodge. Of course, Bakugo did not have it easy either. Midoriya's higher speed meant that Bakugo could not land a direct strike. Many of his counter-strikes went wide. This continued until Midoriya landed a hit. The strike hit Bakugo in the chest and sent the spiky-haired boy flying. If it had not been for his ability to maneuver in midair, Bakugo would have flown out of the ring. Bakugo was surprised by the hit. That nerd is not holding back. Good, then I will turn up the heat. Bakugo then moved in to deliver an attack of his own. Moving faster than he had before, Bakugo landed an explosive strike to Midoriya's gut. The green-haired teen had no time to react. Midoriya did not think that Bakugo would bounce back from his attack so quick. The two boys then began exchanging blows again, but this time more blows landed on each of the competitors. Up in the stands, Aizawa was watching with an irritated look on his face. Both Ida and Uraraka, who were sitting by Aizawa, wondered what was bothering the teen. What's wrong, Aizawa? Midoriya and Bakugo are fighting recklessly. They look good to me. Look again. If I had to guess, they had both thrown caution to the wind. These two are fighting for dominance now. I guess I should not be surprised, given the complicated history between these two. Still, I'm going to have a stern talk with Midoriya about this later. At that moment, Ida's whole body started to vibrate uncontrollably. What is that? It is just my phone. Uraraka wondered what kind of phone did that to a person. Ida went to the hall to answer the call. It was his mother calling to tell Ida that his brother had been seriously injured by a villain attack. Ida returned to his friends to tell them he had to go immediately. Both Aizawa and Uraraka told him to go be with his family, but Aizawa could not help but think of another injured brother. The boy did his best not to think about this, though, but the bleary-eyed teen could not help but think of his name, Oboro. Aizawa quickly refocused his attention on the battle between Midoriya and Bakugo. Maybe the irritation would help block out the sadness. Both Midoriya and Bakugo continued their assault on each other. Both started to realize that they could not go on much longer. Bakugo was getting really bad pain in his arms from overusing his quirk. Midoriya's body was also starting to ache from the strain of One for All flowing through his body. The green-haired boy's previous battles had worn him out. Hey, you damn nerd! You're running on fumes, aren't you? Guess the other matches took more out of me than I thought. You aren't faring any better, though. Your arms are shaking like leaves in the wind. You noticed that? Well, let's finish with a bang! Both boys charged up for their last attacks. Bakugo flew forward. The spiky blonde used his explosions to create a whirlwind of smoke and heat to propel him toward Midoriya at breakneck speed. Midoriya channeled his maximum 35% into his right arm. Take this, you damn nerd! Howitzer impact! Right back at you, Kacchan! Detroit smash! The two powerful attacks collided, causing a whirlwind of smoke and air pressure to cover the arena. For several minutes, the arena was blanketed in a thick layer of smoke. Everyone was silent as they waited to see the outcome. When the air cleared, what everyone saw was unbelievable. Both boys were still standing. Both had taken a serious beating and were struggling to catch their breaths. The arena looked like a disaster area. Pieces of the ring were blown away, and the walls of the stadium had many cracks in them. "You gave it everything, didn't you, Deku?" "Of course I did, Kacchan. You're the one I wanted to beat most of all." With those words, both boys passed out cold on the arena floor. Midnight went over to check on the two boys. "This match is a double knockout. Both contestants are out." The crowd went wild. There were many exclamations about how the students of 1A were already so insanely powerful. The crowd could see how 1A had successfully halted a villain attack. They also shouted how the world would be a safer place once they became full heroes. In the UA staff box, Sir Night-Eye calmly got up to leave. "All Might, meet me at my office tomorrow. There are several things we need to discuss." "Okay, that is a good idea." The award ceremony took place after that. Both Bakugo and Midoriya tied for first place. Unfortunately, the boys were recovering from the battle and could not attend. In the recovery room, Bakugo and Midoriya had recovered a little. Both boys were awake and sitting up in the beds. "You went all out, Deku. Thank you for that." "I wanted to win, but that was all I could do for now." "I have always acted like I was superior to you. I treated you like dirt, yet you never gave up on being a hero. How did you do that? I don't know if I could have done that." "Don't be ridiculous, Kacchan. You would have done just like I did. After all, we were both inspired by the same person. We both have always admired All Might." "You have a point, Deku." "Of course, you would have been far louder and more obnoxious." "Watch it, nerd. I may be injured, but I can still flatten you." "I would like to see you try." A silent agreement passed between the boys. "Okay, nerd. Let's both get stronger. Then, when we are at our strongest, let's fight it out for number 1. Bakugo extended his fist toward Midoriya, not in a threatening way, but in a motion of solidarity. Midoriya was puzzled for a moment. He had never received this kind of attention from Bakugo. Midoriya then got over his shock and returned the fist bump. Sports Festival, the students were all given several days off to recover. All Might told the students of 1A that he would discuss the Pro Hero draft pick when the class reconvened. All Might walked down the street in his weak form to a tall building. The blonde hero entered the building and took the elevator to the 7th floor. The first door on the floor read Night-Eye Hero Agency. All Might opened the door and walked in, unsure of what laid ahead of him. Upon entering Night-Eye's office, All Might was surprised to see Principal Nezu and Recovery Girl sitting in chairs around Night-Eye's desk. "Principal, sir, and Recovery Girl, what are the two of you doing here?"
Night-Eye felt that since the two of us were familiar with your situation that we should sit in on this meeting.
All Might sat down in a chair between Nezu and Recovery Girl. All three faced Night-Eye, who was seated behind his desk. For several minutes, the room was so quiet you could hear a pin drop. Night-Eye was about to speak when All Might interrupted. "Let me speak first, Night-Eye. You were right about me. I should have listened to you. You told me that if I continued fighting after my injury that I would die in a battle against a villain. At the time, I thought I was doing the right thing, but the last few months have shown me that I was wrong. I should have listened to your viewpoint." "Thank you for that, All Might, but I never held a grudge over that, and we have more important things to discuss." The tall man pulsed his fingers on the desk. "We need to discuss your successor. When you first told me you were passing your power to a quirkless child, I was outraged. But after hearing about Izuku Midoriya from Shota Aizawa, Principal Nezu, and Recovery Girl, I have changed my mind." "Really? That is very unlike you, Night-Eye." "Well, I guess we all have had a change of opinion." "So what do you think of young Midoriya?" "He has promise, in most ways. In most ways, he is nothing like you, but in others he is similar indeed." Nezu cleared his throat.
"We have also been discussing what to do with Izuku Midoriya and Shota Aizawa."
This statement by the principal surprised All Might. "Young Midoriya I can understand, but what does young Aizawa have to do with this?" "From the time I have spent with Aizawa, his relationship with Midoriya will be very important going forward. He already knows the secret of One for All, not to mention that his quirk is very rare. The ability to remove quirks, if even temporarily, could be a huge advantage in the future." All Might became suspicious by the tone that Night-Eye used. "Would you be making a reference to Suka Uchi's report on Nomu?" "Nezu did make me aware of it.
coupled that information with the escape of Kurogiri and Tomura Shigaraki, and it makes it clear that your old enemy is far from dead. All Might's body tensed at the thought of the villain. All for One. I have feared that ever since hearing the reports. It pains me to think that any of my students would have to deal with that monster. I understand your feelings, old friend, but we must be logical. If All for One were easy to kill, then the former users of One for All would have finished him long ago. If he is still alive, which we don't know for a fact, then we must prepare. All of us know that All for One is very dangerous. If he does have a plan, then it is likely already in motion. The only thing we can do right now is prepare the new generation to resist this evil. Hopefully they can succeed where we failed. You have a point.
Now that is out of the way, we can discuss what we were planning for the students.
The three heroes filled in All Might on what their plan was. All Might then made some suggestions of his own. That all sounds good. I will let the students know when classes resume. Meanwhile, Aizawa was on his way to Midoriya's apartment. Inko had invited the stern young man over for dinner to celebrate Izuku's accomplishments in the sports festival. Aizawa had never been able to say no to Inko, nor could he resist her cooking. Aizawa arrived at the Midoriya residence after a while. He knocked on the front door and waited. The door was answered by Inko.
Aizawa, it is so nice to see you again. It feels like it has been forever.
It is nice to see you too, Mrs. Midoriya. It has been tough to find time lately, what with training and all.
Inko led Aizawa into the apartment. Please have a seat at the table. Izuku will be out in a minute, and dinner will be served shortly.
That sounds lovely, Mrs. Midoriya. Inko paused before leaving. Is something wrong, Mrs. Midoriya?
I feel weird asking my son's best friend about this.
What is it?
Who is Uraraka? Izuku has been on the phone talking to someone by that name lately. I overheard him one day, and it sounded like a girl's voice.
It is a girl in our class. Her name is Ochaku Uraraka. At that moment, many images flashed through Inko's mind, and, just like her son, she proceeded to blurt out all her fears in an epic ramble.
Oh, my poor son! Some predatory yandere is going to lead him down the path to debauchery and ruin! She will break his heart, leaving him shattered for the rest of his life! I won't let it happen! Tell me where she lives!
Aizawa now saw where Izuku got his rambling and freaking out from. Before you declare war, you should know that Uraraka is a very sweet girl. If I don't miss my guess, she is just as inexperienced with the boys as Izuku is with girls. Inko returned to Earth from Planet Freakout after hearing this.
Oh, really?
Yes. Besides, all they are doing is talking right now, so there is nothing for you to worry about. Besides, this is the Izuku we are talking about. He is so upright, he would not dream of doing anything dishonorable.
Well, that is good to hear. But still, could you keep an eye on him for me?
I don't think that is necessary, but I will. You know I am very fond of Izuku. I would not want him to get his heart broken either. Aizawa then wondered how Uraraka would react to being called a predatory yandere. The thought almost made Aizawa smile. The thought of Uraraka leading anybody to debauchery was laughable. The pink-cheeked girl probably didn't even know what debauchery was. Just as this conversation wrapped up, Izuku Midoriya entered the room. Inko then excused herself and went to finish dinner. The two boys then sat down on the couch while they waited for dinner. The boys discussed many things while they waited. The subjects ranged from how each of the boys had recovered in the days after the sports festival to what UA would throw at them next. On the latter subject, both boys agreed that they best be prepared for anything. After a few minutes, Aizawa decided to address the elephant in the room. With his cool, collected tone, Aizawa asked, "So, how is Uraraka doing?"
Oh, she is doing well. She is almost fully recovered now. She is excited to get back to training and school.
Midoriya said that without thinking. It occurred to Midoriya that he and Uraraka had said that they would not tell their classmates about their conversations. After all, to the green teen's mind, there was nothing to tell. Aizawa gave Midoriya a knowing glance. "So, you two have been talking?" Sometimes Midoriya hated that he could not hide anything from Aizawa.
How long have you known?
Not important. Look, I am not going to pry the details out of you. After all, I'm not Ashido. Just do me a favor. When you decide what you want, then make your move. You are my friend, but so is Uraraka. It would be a crime against rationality to deny you two the happiness you both deserve." Izuku's eyes went wide with wonder. "Aizawa, you do care!" "Of course I care. After everything we have been through together, it would be irrational for me not to care about you. Just remember that I care about Uraraka too. I would hate to see her hurt." Midoriya thought of Aizawa as a brother, but the pine-haired boy doubted that Aizawa thought of himself in that way. Yet, it seemed like he was always acting like a big brother, not just to him, but everyone in his life. That included the members of Class 1A. "Okay, boys, dinner is ready!" Aizawa, Inko, and Izuku sat down to a wonderful meal together. Meanwhile, in a hidden bar in a dark valley, another group was plotting events most sinister. "Kurogiri, who is this?"
"Tomura Shigaraki, this is the hero killer Stain. I have brought him here as you requested."
"So you are the leader of the League. What do you want from me?" "We are trying to rebuild our forces. You would make a great addition to the group. After all, you have so much experience."
"What is your goal?"
"Right now, I just want to kill All Might, and anyone that pisses me off, like this little brat." Shigaraki slid a picture of Izuku Midoriya across the bar.
"I knew this would be a waste of my time. Your goals are that of a child. You have no conviction."
"Who do you think you are talking to?"
"Master, should I intervene?"
From the back of the room, a deep, raspy voice emitted from a television covered in big purple letters that read, "Sound only."
"Let it happen. This may be the only way he will learn. Tomura needs to think about the way in which he must grow."
Before Shigaraki could react, Stain had the palm-faced villain pinned to the floor. Stain's leg held Shigaraki in place, and the wild-eyed man held a dagger to Shigaraki's throat. Shigaraki got a crazy look in his eyes as Stain's dagger almost cut through the hand on his face. "If you damage this hand in any way, I will kill you." Shigaraki then used his quirk to decay Stain's dagger into a pile of rust. Stain was troubled by what just happened. Not his blade, he could get more of those. What really bothered him was what he saw in Shigaraki's eyes.
"It seems you do have potential. There is a warped sprout of conviction. It would be best if I let it grow for a while. I can always kill you later if I don't like the result."
Whatever, just leave already.
"You, Shadow Man, you will return me to Hosu City. There are still many false heroes that I must deal with."
Kurogiri opened a portal, and the hero killer walked through it. After a few days, classes at UA resumed. The students of 1A found that many people recognized them from the sports festival broadcast. Several of the students enjoyed this attention. Aizawa was one of the only ones who did not. All the attention put Aizawa in a fractious mood. All Might entered the room in his skinny form holding a mass of papers.
"I am here with new information for you."
The students of Class 1A had grown so used to these entrances that they did not react.
"You are all looking well. Your performance at the sports festival was remarkable. As you know, many heroes were watching the events looking for new talent. This is what brings us to today's subject, the Pro Hero Draft Pick, which I mentioned briefly before your break." The students were surprised by the news. "Are you ready to take the next step toward your future, young heroes?"
Stood in front of the room as the students of Class 1A took their seats. "As I was saying, your excellent performance at the sports festival has drawn the eyes of many pros. That made this year's Pro Hero Draft much more competitive. Usually, Hero Corps students don't have to worry about the draft until their second or third year, but your class is different, so here are all the offers for those that receive them." All Might pressed a button on a remote, and the offers appeared on the blackboard behind him. The offers showed that Todoroki got the most offers. Both Bakugo and Midoriya tied for the second most. The rest of the offers stayed the same way as in canon, but Aizawa did appear near the bottom with a few others. Know that extending offers to first years means that they are investing in your potential. These offers can be revoked if their interest in you changes before graduation. So that means that we still have to prove ourselves once we graduate.
That is correct, which is why today you will be selecting your hero names. The class broke out into riotous cheering at the news. Keep in mind, young students, that these names will likely be temporary, but you should take them seriously. After all, your hero name tells the world what kind of hero you are, so choose carefully or... Before All Might could finish, Midnight entered the room dramatically. The R-rated hero then shouted, "You'll have hell to pay later!" Many of the boys were shocked as Midnight walked into the room in a suggestive way. That is right. Midnight will have final say over your names. This is her area of expertise. All Might then left the room to check on a few items. With those words, the class set to work coming up with their hero names. Yuga Aoyama was the first to take to the front of the class. The odd boy announced that his hero name would be the Shining Hero I Cannot Stop Twinkling. Midnight suggested that the cannot should be shortened to can't, and then approved the name. This left many of the students puzzled. Mina Ashido then proclaimed she wanted to be called the Ripley Hero Alien Queen. Midnight got a disgusted look on her face and told Ashido no. The pink girl was understandably disappointed. The other students were once again confused by Midnight's decision. Once Tsuyu Asui got her name of rainy season hero Froppy approved, the names started coming quicker. Kaminari was having a problem coming up with the name. The electric blonde was then tapped on the shoulder by Jiro. The purple-haired girl suggested that the sparky blonde call himself Jamming Ye. Kaminari liked this idea. That was until Jiro explained that the name was derived from the fact that Kaminari was always jamming his brain. Jiro then went to the front of the room and got her name Hearing Hero Earphone Jack approved. Kaminari was left feeling quite defeated. Do not feel bad, Kaminari. I haven't come up with anything either. You haven't? Hey, how about Eraserhead? It suits your power perfectly. I guess that will do. I don't plan on being in the spotlight anyway. Aizawa presented this to the class. Some thought it was a strange choice. The students that knew him best, like Midoriya and Uraraka, knew that this choice was because Aizawa couldn't care less about how cool his name sounded. The other students had all chosen their names. The only individuals left were Bakugo and Midoriya. Bakugo had decided that he should be called King Explosion Murder. Midnight turned that down because it seemed too violent. Bakugo gave a loud and ardent argument on why the word murder should be in his name. Midoriya thought for a long while about his name. He finally decided on his name. The green-haired boy walked to the front of the classroom and presented his name. This is my name. It has to be. He displayed his sign that was emblazoned with the name Deku. Are you sure about that, Midoriya? Yes, that could be your name for life. I am sure. Deku was a name that I hated. Then a certain someone showed me that it could have a different meaning. Now I really like it. Deku will be the name of a hero that can save everyone. As Midoriya gave his speech, he glanced back at Uraraka. The brunette was beaming. It made Midoriya happy to see the joy on Uraraka's face. As the period came to an end, All Might stood in front of the class one last time. Now that you have your hero names, you should turn your attention to hero internships. Hero internships? That is correct, young Kirishima. You will all be working under a pro hero for the next week. Wow, that sounds cool! I can't wait! I am glad to hear you are so energized. Those of you who got offers will choose your internship from among those. For the rest of you, your choices will come from a list of agencies provided by the school. Choose carefully. Keep in mind the specialties of the agencies. Let's say you are a hero like 13. You would want to intern at an agency that focuses on rescuing people and not one that focuses on fighting villains. Midnight is correct. You all have until Friday to decide. What? We only have 2 days? Yes, young Kaminari. That means you should decide quickly. Young Midoriya and Aizawa, I need to speak with you for a few minutes. Okay, sir. Yes, sir. The other students of Class 1A were curious about All Might's request. Many of the students were beginning to suspect that there was something going on between All Might, Midoriya, and Aizawa. All Might took the 2 teens into the hallway. Both boys were wondering what the skeletal man had to tell them. First off, young Midoriya, you need to know that Aizawa has been training with my old sidekick, Sir Night-Eye. Midoriya had a surprised look on his face at the admission. Really, Aizawa? Yes, Sir told me not to mention it to anyone. That's why I did not tell you. Oh, I get it, Aizawa, but now it makes a lot of sense.
Sir Night-Eye's power has many similarities with yours.
Midoriya then went into a ramble. All his words followed together in an invigorated but jumbled mess of words and ideas. All Might cleared his throat. Anyway, I and Sir Night-Eye have been discussing your future. We agreed that both of you need to train under my old mentor. He is a hero named Gran Torino.
We get to train under the guy who trained you? That sounds totally amazing!
Yes, he also knows about One for All, too. Wait, Sir Night-Eye I can understand, but how does this guy know about your power, All Might? Gran Torino was the sworn friend of my predecessor. He retired a long time ago, so I forget to count him among the people that know. As All Might explained this, his whole body was visibly shaking, and his tone held an undercurrent of fear. But you should work with him this next week, if that is what your heart says. Here is the address. All Might handed a business card to Midoriya with the location of Gran Torino's place. Seeing the blond man tremble before them made the boys wonder what kind of man Gran Torino was to frighten a hero like All Might. If both you and Sir think this is a good idea, then I am for it.
I am for it too, All Might, but I'm surprised that you agree, Aizawa.
It is the most rational decision. If we are going to have someone shepherding our progress, it might as well be the man who trained the greatest hero. That is good to hear. I will tell the man to expect the both of you. Both Midoriya and Aizawa returned to the classroom. All Might went to the teacher's lounge to file some paperwork. When the two boys entered the classroom, they were bombarded by a host of questions from their classmates. Both boys knew this would happen. They both agreed to tell the other members of Class 1A that they had received an offer to work with a hero that All Might knew, and that the two had agreed to work with the man during the internships. The other students were amazed and jealous of the two boys. Midoriya broke this fanfare by asking everyone a question. Has anyone else decided where they are interning at? Uraraka stepped forward. I have. I'm going to the agency run by battle hero Gunhead. This answer perplexed Midoriya. But Gunhead is a big baller. I thought you wanted to be a hero more like 13. You know, a hero focused on rescuing people. That is still the plan, but ever since my match against Bakugo, I have been thinking that I need to work on my physical strength. The brunette took a fighting stance and punched the air in front of her. Midoriya wondered how Uraraka could look so cute even when she was trying to look tough. That is a great idea. That approach will totally make you better in more situations. I have to agree. You never know when a villain could attack. Being able to disable a threat will help you protect more people. Such dedication to improving. It makes my heart fill with pride. The pink-cheeked girl was very touched by the approval of her friends and classmates, especially Midoriya's. As the classmates left the room, Uraraka asked Midoriya and Aizawa if they wanted to walk to the train station together. The boys agreed. Aizawa did wonder where Ida was, since the blue-haired boy usually walked with them. Uraraka said he had already decided where he wanted to do his internship and went to turn his form in. With that piece of information, the friends departed for the train station. All Might was sitting in the teacher's lounge going over the paperwork for the students' internships when Snipe came up to him. Internships for the first years? Yes. Make sure they take it seriously. There are many third years that still regret their first-year choices. Of course. All Might was looking over the forms of the students who had already made their decisions. He stopped on Tenya Ida's form. He noticed he decided on interning at the normal hero Maul's agency. The blonde hero found this strange. He knew that Ida had gotten better offers than that. All Might then noticed that the agency was in Hosu City. This fact made All Might wonder if this had something to do with Ida's brother. Time passed, and the students of 1A made their internship selections. They were now gathered at the train station and about to set off on their week-long program. All Might decided to give a few words to his students before they set off. All right, everyone has their costumes. Remember, you do not have permission to wear them in public yet, and mind your manners with the pro heroes. Some of them can be interesting characters, to say the least.
Yes, sir, we are ready to roll! Yes, we are going to kick ass and take names!
I appreciate the enthusiasm. All right, everyone, conduct yourself as a UA student should. Every student agreed and set off to catch their trains. Aizawa, Midoriya, and Uraraka stopped Ida. The three had noticed that the blue-haired boy had been acting strangely. They informed Ida that if he wanted to talk, they were there to listen. Ida thanked them for the sentiment, but insisted that everything was fine. Ida then left to catch his train. The trio were left feeling more worried than before, but decided they should catch their trains. After a while, Midoriya and Aizawa arrived at the address All Might had given them. Both boys looked over the building with its haphazardly placed sign and crumbling facade. Both boys thought it was a strange place for the guy who trained the #1 hero to call home. The boys opened the front door and entered the building. "Hello? Is anyone home? It's Izuku Midoriya and Shota Aizawa from UA. Is anyone here?" The room was dark, but the boys could make out a shape on the floor in front of the door. To the horror of the two boys, the shape looked like a body in a pool of blood. At this realization, Midoriya freaked out. "Holy whoa, he's dead!" Just as the green-haired boy said that, the body then popped upright. The old man then said in a haggard voice, "I'm alive." Midoriya then freaked out again. "Ah, he's alive!" Aizawa remained composed. The dark-haired teen thought to himself that this was going to be an interesting week. Meanwhile, Stain, Kurogiri, and Tomura Shigaraki were standing on top of a building overlooking Hosu City. Stain had a determined but crazed look on his face, while Shigaraki had his usual aura of annoyance about him. "Why do we need to stand on this roof? Can't you just kill a hero and get it over with? You must learn patience. My aim is to exterminate unworthy heroes. That takes time and observation."
You have drive and ambition. You have thought through your goal very well.
Finally, someone understands. Silence passed over the roof. Stain looked over the city. His red eyes grew more bloodshot, and an aura of hate and anger grew around the blade-clad man. After a long pause, the wild-eyed man spoke with a voice full of hate and determination. "Hero is a title for those who have achieved great things! This world is full of fakes and criminals who chase petty dreams!" Stain then shouted to the heavens, "Hero, I will reclaim that word! Everything I do is to create a stronger society! Until then, I will not die! There is only one man who I will let kill me! All Might is worthy!" Both Midoriya and Aizawa stood in the doorway of the building owned by Gran Torino. The boys were shocked to see that the hero was a little old man with a hunched back and moving with a walking stick. The two teens wondered if this was really the hero who had trained All Might. As those thoughts swirled through their heads, the boys asked the old man why he was laying on the floor. Gran Torino started swiping at the red liquid on his costume. The gray-haired old man replied in a weak voice, "You see, I was carrying a big plate of sausages covered in ketchup when I suddenly fell down. Clumsy me." Both looked at each other with a questioning glance. "Midoriya, can I speak with you outside?" "Sure thing, Aizawa. Can you excuse us for a moment, sir?" "Okay, I will just clean up this mess." Aizawa and Midoriya sat their costume cases down in the main room of the building. Both teens then went out onto the front stoop. "This man is in no condition to train us." "I know. Since he trained All Might, I figured he had to be old, but this guy is out of his mind. I better call All Might and let him know the condition this guy is in." The boys then looked back to see Gran Torino rummaging through their costume cases. The sight of this freaked out Midoriya. "Hey, that's our stuff!" Gran Torino then gave a deadpan reply. "These are pretty nice costumes. Why don't you two show me what you've got?" Both boys were confused. They wondered if this was the same man they talked to a few seconds ago. "Hey, who are you two?" This left both Midoriya and Aizawa wondering what the old man's deal was. "Sir, we were sent here to get stronger. We want to become heroes that can one day surpass All Might. That means we can't hang around here and joke around for a week. I'm sorry." "That goes double for me." Gran Torino then stood up. "As I thought." The silver-haired man then took a deep breath and jumped up with impressive force. He zipped around the room like a deranged housefly. Both Aizawa and Midoriya were shocked by this display of speed and agility. The two boys realized this man was the one that trained All Might. Sometimes All Might would call the students of Class 1A newbies during training. The blonde hero also had two sides to his personality. Sometimes he was serious, and other times he would play dumb. Midoriya looked over at Aizawa and then back at the elderly hero. A determined smile came across his face. "Okay, teach us everything." Same here. Both Midoriya and Aizawa changed into their hero costumes. Midoriya found a letter in his costume suitcase from the support team that made his costume. The new version of his costume had just recently come back from the design studio. It had been sent there after Midoriya had trashed the first one in his training match against Bakugo. The letter said that the design team had changed a few aspects of the costume to better fit Midoriya's fighting style. While Midoriya understood, he was not happy that the support crew had changed the base design without his permission. The green-eyed teen could not help but think of Mei Hatsumi. After the two boys were dressed, they went after Gran Torino. The dark-haired teen then planned on binding him with his capture cloth. But this did not happen. Gran Torino was so fast that Aizawa could not lay eyes on him. The old hero jetted behind the bleary-eyed teen and bound him in his own capture weapon. Midoriya did not fare any better. Even while using 30% full cowling, the elderly hero was able to dodge his strikes. The interaction ended with Midoriya pinned to the floor by Gran Torino. You two are impressive. I can see why Toshi and Night-Eye are so taken with you two. But you both need more combat training. So that is what you will focus on while you're here this week. Aizawa untangled himself from his clothes and asked, What do you mean, sir? I can tell from this exchange and how you two performed at the sports festival that you are developing your own combat styles. The problem is that you do not have much experience in using this style against real opponents. So, in the week we have together, I will help you overcome that deficiency. I see. What do we do first, sir? Gran Torino turned and walked towards the door. Think over all that I have said while I go grab us some grub. As Gran Torino left the building, he thought to himself that both boys were monsters in the making. It had been years since the old hero had dodged that many serious attacks in such a short time span. You did well, Toshinori. Not only did you find a worthy successor to One for All, but you also found someone that he can rely on. These two might just outshine you, All Might. The next day, Gran Torino was putting both boys through a punishing sparring session. After both boys were dizzy and tired from being pummeled from every direction, Gran Torino made an announcement. That is enough for today. Midoriya got a panicked look on his face. No, please let us go more! Agreed, we are not done yet. Gran Torino admired their endurance, but he did not change his mind. No. If you fight only me, you two might pick up some weird habits. Get your costumes on, boys. We are going to fight some villains. Both Midoriya and Aizawa changed. All three heroes then took a cab to the train station. Gran Torino told the boys that they were going to Tokyo. It would be useless to stay where they were at because the crime rate was so low. It would be easier to find evildoers in a crowded city, and that is why most hero agencies were in urban areas. Sir, will we be passing through Hosu City? Yeah, that is right. Midoriya then texted Ida to tell the blue-haired boy of their route. After a few minutes, Midoriya got worried because Ida had not replied. Normally, the bespectacled teen never let a message go unanswered for more than a minute. Aizawa saw the look on Midoriya's face. You are worried about Ida. How did you know? Because I have been worried about him too, since our exchange in the train station. Me too. Do you think he is after the hero killer? What makes you say that, Midoriya? Well, I heard the news that Ingenium was injured by Stain. Then I heard that Ida took an internship at a low-level agency run by the normal hero Manuel in Hosu City. The place's brother was attacked. I thought the same thing. Let's hope that Ida has not lost his level head. As Aizawa finished his statement, the side of their train was ripped open. Laying on the floor of the train car with blood covering his head was a hero with a puffy coat. Then a monster with pale blue skin and an exposed brain ripped his way into the car. A short time before, Kurogiri and Tomura Shigaraki stood on top after the hero killer had leaped off to claim the life of another hero imposter. Shigaraki was becoming more agitated by the moment. I hate that hero killer. He is so high and mighty, but he is wasting his time focusing on a small stage. You should not mock his methods. In every city that Stain has appeared in, the crime rates have dropped. Whether this is out of fear or because the heroes become more aware of their failings is unknown. But the truth is that his does bring change.
Oh, isn't that wonderful? I guess you could say the hero killer is really a hero breeder.
Shigaraki then took on a more serious and deranged tone.
It just won't work. We can't agree on a basic level. Kurogiri, let out the Nomus.
Shigaraki recalled a conversation he had with All for One. The palmed-faced villain had asked the Lord of Evil if any more Nomu had been completed. All for One replied that he had adjusted the behavior of 8 of them, but they were nowhere as strong as the USJ Nomu. Shigaraki asked All for One for these Nomus. All for One agreed, but only gave Shigaraki 3. Shigaraki stood on the rooftop cackling.
You are finished, hero killer. Come tomorrow morning, people will forget that you ever existed.
Back on the train, Gran Torino jetted into action when the Nomu broke its way into the train.
You boys stay here. I will take care of this.
The elderly hero delivered a swift kick to Nomu's head. Gran Torino then grabbed the creature and jetted off into the distance. Aizawa and Midoriya stood by the hole. The two could see a massive fire and many panicking citizens below. Aizawa looked over at Midoriya. The dark-haired boy knew his friend would not remain on the sidelines like Gran Torino told them. Let's go, Izuku.
Really, Shota?
Even if I told you to stay put, you would still go. So the only rational thing for me to do is follow you and keep you out of trouble. Both boys leaped from the train and ran toward the danger. Since both boys were very quick on their feet, they arrived at the site of a big fire. The boys almost did not believe their eyes. The area was a scene out of a disaster movie. Cars, lampposts, and entire sections of sidewalk had either been destroyed or reduced to rubble. 2 large Nomu were running rampant. Many heroes were fighting the beasts, but having no luck against the brain-headed Goliaths. As the boys surveyed the scene, they heard a voice yell, "Tenya! Where are you, Tenya?" Aizawa saw the man that the voice belonged to. He knew who the hero was. The terrible picture formed in the dark-haired boy's keen mind. Midoriya, what we feared may have come to pass. Aizawa looked at Midoriya, and both boys understood what needed to happen. Midoriya ran off to find Ida, and Aizawa went to help the heroes. The bleary-eyed teen also planned to get the pro-heroes' help once Midoriya found Ida. Midoriya used his 20% full cowling to search the back alleys of Hosu. After several minutes of running, Midoriya found Ida. The blue-haired boy was pinned to the ground by the hero killer. The bandana-clad man found a katana raised over Ida and was bringing it down to finish the bespectacled teen off. Midoriya wasted no time. The green teen rushed in and delivered a smash to Stain's face. This caused Stain to retreat further into the alley. Midoriya, what are you doing here? Don't worry, Ida. I came to save you.
So your friend came to save you, Ingenium. It seems he is more heroic than you.
Midoriya quickly grabbed his phone and hit a button. This sent his location to all his contacts. He meant to send it to only Aizawa, but he did not have time for that kind of precision. Midoriya noticed that there was another hero on the ground across the way from Ida in the alley. Midoriya believed his name was Native. The man had several stab wounds and was not moving. Get up, Ida! Get to the street, hurry! I can't move. Ever since that monster cut me, I haven't been able to move. When Midoriya heard that, he knew he was screwed. Midoriya and Ida could have worked together to get the injured hero to safety. Midoriya knew there was no way he could fend off the hero killer while dragging 2 people. Midoriya knew he had to fight, and he had to make sure he was not cut. If he did get cut, then he and the other 2 would be at the mercy of Stain. Stain attacked the emerald-eyed boy with his katanas. The red-eyed man slashed at the green teen with a flurry of attack. Midoriya dodged these attacks with ease. His time training under Gran Torino had helped him to track Stain's movements. The man was crazed and probably a lunatic, but he was fast. Midoriya dodged a large swiping slash with a jump. The green teen bounced off the wall of the alley and delivered a powerful smash to Stain's head. Midoriya was overjoyed at how well he was doing so far, but that feeling ended when Midoriya suddenly found himself on the ground, unable to move.
Midoriya looked over at the hero killer. The wild-haired man was licking one of his blades. Midoriya noticed that the blade had a small amount of blood on it. He then noticed he had a small scratch on his arm. The green teen knew that Stain's quirk was not activated by cutting his enemy, but by their blood.
You fight well for a kid. You came to save your friend and managed to make a flashy entrance. I think you are worthy of staying alive, but your friend must die. So just relax while I finish these two off.
As Stain walked toward Ida, a blast of fire ripped through the alley. Stain dodged the blast with no problem. Ida was safe again, for the moment. The bicolor teen was holding his phone toward the greenette. But then, I knew you were not the kind to send cryptic messages for no reason. Midoriya was thankful to see Todoroki, but the green-eyed teen was surprised to see that Todoroki was using his flames.
So many interruptions tonight.
Watch out, Todoroki! Don't let him get your blood! If he does, you will be paralyzed like us!
Todoroki slipped his phone into his back pocket. A villain that uses people's blood to render them immobile. That explains the blades. As the dual-color teen said that, Stain threw one of his daggers and cut Todoroki's face. Stain ran at Todoroki. The teen tried to block the villain's advance with ice, but Stain would just cut through it or dodge it. Todoroki's fire was equally as ineffective. The teen was on the defensive in this battle. As Midoriya watched the fight before him, the greenette knew that if something did not change soon, they were going to lose this fight. Midoriya tried with all his might to move, but it was useless. The green teen said to himself,
I can't let this happen. What was all the training for? I must help, but I can't do it on my own. I need help.
A mysterious voice spoke in Midoriya's head.
It is about time you asked, kid.
Suddenly, the world went dark. A moment later, Midoriya found himself standing before a tall man with a shaved head. The man was wearing a black costume and had goggles on his head.
I am the fifth wielder of One for All. Please do be impressed.
Midoriya tried to speak but found that he did not have a mouth. When he looked down, he also found that most of his body was covered in shadows.
You do not have a mouth? That's freaking me out, kid.
The man looked him over.
Oh, I see. You're only at 35%. Well, you don't need to speak. We don't have much time, so listen closely. One for All is changing.
Thank you all for indulging yourselves in the story thus far. Hope you enjoyed it. Now, there are a few things that I'd like to go over before the video ends. Firstly, we've got a second channel called Anime Deep Dive. Anime Deep Dive goes deep into the facts and lore of a wide variety of anime. It's sure to expand your weeb knowledge for all kinds of series guaranteed. On top of that, we have a third channel called We the Celestials Naruto What Ifs. It's what we do on this channel already, but in the vast world and lore of Naruto. Go check it out if you're in the mood for some jutsu action. I'd like to let you all know, on behalf of We the Celestials, I'd like to thank everyone involved in the production of today's awesome content. Their details will be in the description below. If you're perhaps interested in what we do here at WTC, then I would like to extend out an invitation to join the team. The only caveat being we only accept members 16 and older to join our crew. You can find us on our Discord, which you can locate in the description below. Our Discord is an all-around fantastic place to be, whether you're a fan or looking to join our band of misfits. All you gotta do is hit up the recruitment server and sign up for whichever category of work that fulfills your interests. We're always looking for members to join us. Well, that's it from us for today's video, so thank you all for watching and have a great day.